The patch is finally here, guys. Finally. And it's 7.36. It's actually a pretty big and significant patch. More power creep, as, everyone always loves power creep. It does make the game more fun. It's just in the long run, it's kind of like, kind of makes the game a lot crazier when there's so many more creeps now. There's so much power creep. There's so many more abilities, all these crazy things. But it is cool, fresh, new, exciting. There's so much new stuff to talk about. And specifically, let's just jump into it. You can probably see that there's all these weird new abilities happening, and that's because there's two things they added, which is pretty cool. Innate abilities, which basically every hero gets a passive. I saw some people kind of predicting this, that this might be the case, or they were saying this. I don't know if it was from that little teaser that they gave, where people were kind of piecing together stuff that was going on, but it seemed like someone leaked or somehow knew that every hero was going to get a passive, which is kind of insane. So some things have been changed, which we'll go through every single hero, that what they've gotten, that kind of stuff, and all the significant changes in the patch. But just broadly, there are new things that heroes have, and then other things like, Tidebringer from Kunkka, it's just kind of given an extra point, or there are completely new things. So how Medusa has 5 points in the mana shield? They kind of changed that now to some heroes have 5 points in certain abilities like Tidebringer for Kunkka. And then sometimes they gave, other heroes abilities like Dawnbreaker. You can see this here. Reveals the whole map to allies when the sun rises. So there's just things about the hero that are innate that you don't have to put skills into, or you just get them level 1, that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. So we can go through all of those, but I'll just go through the general ones first now, and that's generally what's happening with every hero, which is crazy. And then hero facets, which is pretty cool too, because this gives you another thing to do before the game starts. It's not just drafting that's important, it's also drafting a hero and then picking what the hero does, which is pretty cool, because then it makes drafting in the very beginning, you can pick the heroes that you like, and they might have 2 different play styles or 2 things they can do, and then based on the draft, when the enemy's done picking, you can say, okay, well, actually this hero's better this way or that way, depending on what happens, where sometimes you might just pick a hero that you like first phase as a support or something, and then it's absolutely terrible, where now you have different things you can do. Like you see here, Wraith King can choose between summoning skeletons or doing extra damage. Viper has this AoE burst damage, or get more defensive buffs when he's in Nether Toxin. So every hero has these things, which is really, really cool, because it gives, that added extra thing that you can plan for after the pick phase happens. Like I said, you're not straight up countered every single time. But again, more power creep, where all these things are happening. You have to learn so much more now. It's crazy. They're just expanding the map, expanding the heroes. Everyone does a billion things now. But we'll get into all the hero specific stuff after I go through the general changes. So here they just kind of go through innate abilities and facets. You can read more about that, but I pretty much explained it straight. It's pretty straightforward. They give more examples, but they just kind of repeat that here. Then there's other stuff that's actually really important for what is going on with the general strategy of Dota, and they kind of this meme here, which is pretty funny. Strategy times extended by 15, 10, 5 seconds for every 1, 2, 3 weeks immediately after the numbered patch, which is kind of cool. So for the first week, we'll have 15 more seconds, and it'll go down from there. It's kind of just a cool little meme thing that they did. I mean, it actually does help, because you get to learn what's going on. You also have to choose what your heroes do, but still, it's kind of funny. But really, the big thing is that Glyph of Fortification no longer refreshes when the first tier 3 tower is destroyed. Now, I would be an advocate, I'm someone that thinks that it should never refresh. It should just be you get the glyph and that's it. But this is definitely better, because now when you're going high ground, you can at least destroy the tier 3 tower and then get the ranged racks, which is probably what's going to happen in most cases, unless you know that the enemy doesn't have buyback and they don't have enough time to actually, respawn and come back and kill you before you get the melee racks. Or you can go for the melee racks first, and it doesn't matter because they refresh the glyph, and now they're glyphing for a ranged racks, which is easier to kill. It's not a big deal. You can just leave. So it just depends. It kind of makes you choose which one based on timing, but it's better because you at least get 1 racks. If you have to do it really quick, if they're about to respawn, you can just quickly do the ranged racks and then back, which happens a lot. Or, the melee racks is more important. You can get the melee racks if you have more time and they can't really do anything about it. Then the glyph refreshes, so you can't just go from melee racks to the next, it delays a little bit more time, where you don't just go tier 3 melee and then go to the next tier 3 on the other lane. So at least there's some punishment for that, or it's not like you get so many sets of racks immediately, that kind of thing. So it delays it a little bit. So I do like that change. And then Glyph of Fortification now refreshes when the first melee barracks is destroyed. So that's kind of basically just the addition to what I was saying, is that when the melee barracks is destroyed, now the glyph refreshes. So that's kind of just overall. I think that is a decent change now. It's not as drastic as I would have liked, that a lot of people would have liked. I think they should have kind of just gotten rid of a lot of those things. But it still allows for more comeback mechanic and stuff, but just a little bit better. Then there's other small things like AoE bonuses now affect cleave, which is pretty cool because, you know, cleave had a set with Battle Fury or like Sven or something. Now you can cleave like bigger, which is probably not something that's really going to matter all that much because you're not going to get like bigger AoE bonus on like a carry. But still, if you could get buffed up with that from a support or something, that could be pretty cool too. This was just a glitch that dominated creeps bypass backdoor protection. Now this is an interesting one too. This basically just says that when you get denied, the enemy still gets experience. So basically, if you have Veno or Queen of Pain and you cast, you know, your Veno or Queen of Pain, you cast an ability on the enemy and it's one that they can get denied by, you know, Gale or the Shadow Strike, then when the enemy gets denied, you still get experience but not gold. So it just allows denying to be not as good. It's not just like you get completely punished for it, which is pretty cool because denying is kind of annoying, but I do like denying that it's in the game, but it's just not as good right now, and they've kind of gotten away from denying in general. This is the big one though. Mana bars always being visible. This is pretty controversial, I'd say. And it's one that I'm kind of against, I would say, just because it does make the skill cap like lower. It's a lot easier now to see whether people have mana, and it's just going to change the dynamic of the game. Now you could say that, like, is it really something where we should need to click the heroes to see the mana, you know, so that we know if they can cast spells and stuff like that? It is like debatable, and it does make the game easier, but it is one of those things that it is a skill to do and you could learn to do it. It's just, it's kind of awkward, but I guess it does make the game a little bit easier. And I think some of these kinds of things, because they recently changed, like you can click on the enemy portraits up at the top to see what their items are recently, where before you actually had to find them on the map, click on them and see their items. So they have been changing this kind of stuff, and it hasn't had a drastic impact. Like, you still have to be good and understand the game. It just, this makes it a little bit easier. And in some cases, like, I don't know if a lot of you remember when they had one courier, that was kind of insane, and now they have a courier for everybody. So it does make the quality of life for the game and just learning the game and understanding the game a little bit simpler, but it does kind of make it not as complicated as it once was. So, I mean, now that I think about it some more, I'm not like totally against this. It's probably fine, but just like with power creep, it's little things like this that just kind of take away the strategy from the game, or like the skill cap, and then it just isn't as insane as it once was, which maybe that's a good thing. But this kind of game, I mean, Dota is just known for being such a crazy, complicated, complex, and deep game that you don't want to see that completely go away. Then Fountain buff grants couriers haste movement speed, not a very big deal, honestly. And then this is kind of quality of life, that if you press the deliver button, it doesn't have anything, it goes back home. And then mana cost reduction no longer effects no longer work on abilities that drain mana over time. So this is just like things that where you press the ability and then just drain slowly. Mana cost reduction doesn't affect that, which is a pretty big nerf to a lot of heroes that like that and then buy, you know, Kaya and upgrade it and stuff like that. So it's maybe, you know, to Winter Wyvern is a pretty big one, I would say. And Storm Spirit is another big one. There's just like other heroes like this that, you know, they really rely on that mana cost reduction and then those channeled abilities, which is kind of a huge nerf to them. It's just a little bit odd. I thought that they did this. I don't really know why they would do this, because I don't feel like there's anything super giga broken that I'm thinking about that's like, oh, this is the reason this hero is so insanely good. I mean, yes, Leshrac is very good. I will give you that. Lesh is super good. But I don't really even know, does this really just directly affect Lesh's ult? I mean, maybe that is the case. I don't know if it says that here. But, yeah, it just seems a little bit awkward, but whatever. I mean, it is what it is. Then some quality of life change things. They also added, like, basically this weird Dota Lab feature where you can see the range of a lot of stuff, and it's like persistent on your screen. So you can actually see like how big your cast range is, how big your attack range is, and all that kind of stuff, which is another thing along the lines of mana bars always being visible. So but it is kind of cool because it's one of those things in the past you would just have to innately know the range of stuff, where now you can kind of like just see it on the screen a little bit better, which again makes it the game a little bit easier. But is it really something that you need to like, does that need to be a skill cap is kind of always the argument. Does that need to be something that you have to just innately know, and when it could just be on the screen? Because a lot of this stuff comes from back in the day when it was Dota 1 and it was on Warcraft 3, and there just wasn't the amount of like processing power and ability to put stuff on the screen, so you couldn't do certain things. Like that's kind of, I think, even why there was like one courier and all this different stuff. And so it is one of those things that if it's a holdover from that, do we really need it? And so this is kind of a new feature, but it's also not like a feature that they're just putting in for everyone. It's like a Dota Labs feature, which is kind of cool. And then dynamic health bars too. It kind of just allows you to know when you're hovering over a unit to see the health bar more visibly. Same thing with that they did recently with the other Dota Labs thing, where you get your health bar is more like vibrant and just pronounced. Because sometimes when the chaos of team fights happen, you know probably from experience that you can just like get lost. Like if your camera's going around, there's a million things happening, you're like, what is going on in the game? Where's my hero? That can definitely happen sometimes. So this is kind of the same thing, but for heroes you're trying to click on and stuff like that. So I do like those kind of small quality of life things. Then ability draft, I'm just going to skip all that because no one really cares about ability draft. And then we're going to go to item updates. So basically Roshan's banner, everyone was saying change this item because it was completely useless. Like nobody cared about it. It was just terrible. And now it's basically one of those where you just kind of place it on top of yourself when you're pushing, and it makes every creep that you're pushing with invulnerable. And this is really, really good now. Now it's not as big of a range. It doesn't last as long. It's not global, all this kind of stuff. And melee heroes now do twice as much damage to it, but they actually have to get in there and click it. Otherwise, when you're pushing high ground, they can't just like spam spells from afar. You know, there's a lot of heroes that the way that they de-push, like a Zeus or whatever, or even like a sniper, and these are heroes that are really good right now for defending high ground, what they do is they just cast their abilities from far away, and it clears the creeps, or it pulls the creeps in, and then it's harder to push because now the tower has to hit you, or maybe the backdoor protection goes away, all that kind of stuff, and it just makes it more difficult to push. But now if you have Roshan's banner, they have to kill that first because the creeps just will not take damage, which is pretty cool. So I do like how they changed this, then reworked it. We'll see if it's really that big of a deal. I'm not sure. I mean, there are definitely situations where this will probably be better than it was before, but we'll just have to see how it plays out. Maybe it'll be completely giga broken too. We'll just have to see. Then overall, I'll just kind of quickly go through some of the items, like Dragonlance not being disassembled, not a big deal. Eternal Shroud, just a small nerf. Orchid, a small weird change to status resistance that I don't even think anyone realized. Maelstrom, a small nerf because it's been such a really good item for so long. Octarine, little nerf. And then Sage is like the big one that it's no longer giving you 20% status resistance. Now it's slow resistance, which slow resistance is, you know, whatever, fine. But status resistance was so big. It has been such a big thing for a long time, and they've kind of been getting rid of it gradually over time. And this is just one more step to just like removing it completely. And so that's huge. In fact, I don't really know how many things these days really even give you status resistance, because it used to be Sage, it used to be even Satanic, it used to be a bunch of stuff, and now, I mean, I'd have to check, but there's not many things that give you status resistance now, which is kind of crazy. They've kind of nerfed all these a little bit for cost. Then Heaven's Halberd was changed a little bit too there, along with, because it includes the Sage. And then Manta's been a really good item now, so they increased the cost on that. Meteor Hammer, no one ever buys this, so it's buffed a little bit, but actually total cost unchanged, so the recipe was not changed at all. So actually it's not buffed at all. It's kind of the same thing, but it's kind of weird because nobody buys it, so they bothered to change it, but just to make it the same when no one buys it. And then all these things were just kind of adjusted with that in mind as well, except now Kaya Sange gives the provides 25% slow resistance instead of stat resistance, and it gives you that 25% mana cost and mana loss reduction in addition, which is interesting. Now this Yasha and Kaya gives you 25% cast speed bonus, which is interesting, which I don't think was there before, obviously, because now it's providing you this, which is pretty cool because it's like a different thing, like depending on which one you want to go, which is interesting. It's something that I don't know that we've really had cast speed bonus to too many things. I feel like Bane had some weird thing, but that was more like range and stuff. I think he might still have that with his Enfeeble or whatever, but I don't know about cast speed bonus. That's not really been too big of a thing. We've had the AoE and all that kind of stuff, but But yeah, then Wind Waker's been just a really broken item, so they're just kind of nerfing it there, which is interesting. And then neutral items, the Ogre Totem gets crazy, I don't know, animation for every single hero. So that's all the items. That's the general changes. Now we're going to jump into the heroes, and the heroes are the big one for this patch because every single hero has something to talk about. So we're probably going to go through every single hero, and I'm just going to highlight the things that are important and what I think about them because it's going to take forever if I go through every hero and get all the details. So we're going to try to hit this fast, quick, give you the bullet points, give you the straightforward things that you need to know about each hero. Just bing, bang, boom as fast as we can without just going into insane detail, making this like a 5-hour video. So let's just jump into the heroes then. So let's start off with the first hero, and that is Abaddon. So honestly, this is not a great hero to start off with, especially with the innate ability because they gave him 10% faster respawn time. This feels like a placeholder. They couldn't think of something else because this is the classic old school talent when they first introduced it to a bunch of heroes where it was, people were respawning after 60 seconds after in like the 50, 60-minute games after death and stuff. And it was just like you could not push. You couldn't do anything. I think Lone Druid was the classic one. Now, this is only 10%. It's not that much. But still, that feels a little bit awkward. But I mean, overall, this hero does have now a facet, which is about reducing cooldowns and stuff. So I'll give them that. It does sort of have a similar kind of thing where it's at least on theme for what they're doing here, but still, I don't think anyone is going to be a fan of the faster respawn time. So hopefully this is the only one that we see. But yeah, basically that's his innate ability just from his passive that you don't have to choose. But then there's the quickening and the Mephetic Shroud. So the quickening is basically every time a unit dies, creep or hero, you get cooldown reduction basically by 0.2 seconds for a creep, and then heroes are 4 seconds on all of his abilities, which is pretty good. And then the Aphotic Shield is upgraded for this one where it no longer does a burst of damage at the end, but it increases the barrier by 50%, so it's basically double effective. And then it kind of works like Blade Mail, where people take damage when they do damage to the shield. So it doesn't burst at the end, but it does make you tankier, and then people just take damage more when they're doing damage to you. So it just kind of seems like, are you casting a bunch of abilities? Are you all defensive? Do you run in with this? It just depends. It's hard for me to say which playstyle this is going to favor, whether it's just like carry or offlane or support, because support, this is going to be good for putting it on people like your carry or your offlane or something like that. That can be really good, but then also having more spells is also really good on the support. Then for like carry, the spells maybe aren't as big of a deal for right clicking or offlane, so you might want to just choose this. I just feel like the Mephetic Shroud is going to be better all around, especially now because they changed Curse of Avernus to basically not be something where you have to hit them 4 times so it stacks. So it's not going to be a hero that buys Manta really anymore. It's just when you hit them, they get slowed, and all of the bonuses that you get from that are just immediately applied. So the bonus attack speed, the movement slow, the damage per second, all of that stuff just immediately applies on the first hit, but they nerfed everything to like account for that to make it not super overpowered, because obviously if it did everything the same on one hit, it would just be broken. It also doesn't silence anymore. So this is more just like an offensive thing that you get on the first hit, more of a regular passive, not one of those I have to stack it up. And then kind of the important thing is the talents changed around this curse, but level 25 plus 80 Curse of Avernus bonus attack speed, which is pretty crazy. So obviously everything here was like nerfed to account for that one hit, but this is pretty big at the very end, because now when you're hitting people, I mean, you're going to get that every time, so it increases that attack speed, which is kind of crazy. So this is an interesting hero. This hero has not really gotten picked very much at all. Base damage decreased by 6, I think, to account for this. I think this is sort of pushing this hero into more offlane carry role kind of thing. It's not as cheesy as maybe it once was, but we'll see what happens with this, because this could be very interesting since you don't really have to like rely on getting stacks, and you can just choose this, and your Aphotic Shield is just way tanky, giving you like a Blade Mail level 1, which is kind of insane. Then we can go to Alchemist next. This is really not a big deal because Grieval's Greed was already an innate ability, so this is kind of like tried out on him. And on Medusa, they have the 2 versions. He already had Grieval's Greed a few patches ago where they changed it, where it's just something you don't level up and you just get it from level 0 basically. And then Medusa has 5 levels in her shield, and that was kind of the first try of that sort of passive thing too. So he just has Grievel's Greed, same thing, and then he just can either start with 250 gold, or he can have more of a like caster focus, maybe support focus thing, where when he's chemical raging, he can stun more and he can use his berserk potion more. Their cooldown is reduced, so that can be better. This might be, like I said, more of a support kind of thing, not as much of a carry. Now, this is obviously going to be better for carry probably in the support, but you could still maybe use this if you just really didn't need the 250 bonus gold as like a carry or something, but it's usually going to be better because you're going to get your item timing even faster. And then small change, corrosive weaponry no longer reduces status resistance, because they're kind of changing the status resistance thing. They're pretty much like removing it from the game, it seems like, altogether. And then now it's reducing base attack damage. So he can just like man up on people more because they're going to get slowed, which is what it already did. And now their attack damage is going to get reduced. And this hero attacks really fast. So this is pretty good for this hero. I mean, these changes are not that big of a deal. He also got some bonus health regen. Like, it's not crazy like some of the other heroes, so we'll see. I mean, when I just read this, I think, oh, this is really good actually for the hero, but I think so many other heroes got buffed and changed. We'll see if this is even enough to make this hero relevant. It's hard to say. I think if you just gave him all these things in last patch, he would be very good, but we'll see what happens in this patch because there's so much stuff. No one's going to know what's good, I'm pretty sure. Then AA is very interesting because basically his innate ability has been changed so that he gets stacks for all of his abilities, and those stacks do damage and slow you. So if we actually just skip the facets right now, we'll just go to all of these abilities. If you read them, they apply stacks. And so one of the biggest ones actually is Ice Blast. No longer deals damage over time on its own. It now applies these Death Rhyme stacks. So this is kind of the big thing, which is interesting. The first thing I thought is, I wonder how that, affects Rubik when he steals the spells. Maybe he just doesn't get any of that because he doesn't have this innate ability. I mean, I haven't read Rubik yet, actually, now that I'm when I'm looking at this, so maybe he steals all of those things too. It's hard to say. But the point is this kind of changes the dynamic of the hero, especially because you're not just going to be able to sit in base and just like click R from across the map anymore, really, because you want to get in there. You want to be doing all of this, like casting all these spells, hitting people with all these spells so that you get more of these stacks. And then especially if you pick this Bone Chill facet, which also makes each stack reduce the target's strength by a bunch, which is pretty good. 1.25 is a lot. So if you can hit all of these abilities, you get all these stacks of reducing their strength, doing a ton of damage, and then this Ice Blast, it still makes them not able to regen, so that can just like compound to be extremely effective. And I like what they did here because I think that stupid sitting in base, just casting ult from across the map is kind of a dumb way to play the hero. Like, it's not really fun. It just doesn't fit what you want the hero to do. So I like that they kind of changed this, forcing you to actually play the hero in the game. And then Exposure, Cold Field deals Death Rhyme damage to all enemies within an AoE, so it's not just about like hitting them anymore just directly with all these spells. Like, this doesn't do damage on its own anymore. Now this is like also an AoE, which can be good, I think, but honestly I feel like Bone Chill is just better overall. Like, this is obviously good if you're a support and you're not going to be hitting all the spells and all those kinds of things, and you do AoE damage, and in some cases that's going to be pretty good. But honestly, I feel like this Bone Chill one is just really good, reducing people's strength with all these different stacks. I mean, here you see no longer does damage on its own, now applies 8 stacks. That's pretty crazy, honestly, with all this strength reduction. So that's pretty much Ancient Apparition. Now we'll go into Anti-Mage. And now his Mana Break is an innate ability where you can level it up, 4 more times from that one you get. So you get 5 levels in it. And they kind of rescaled the numbers here for the mana drain, which is actually better overall at the max level. But the big thing is it doesn't slow the target by default when you drain their full mana. What really is the focus now for this hero is that you're going to be doing more damage, especially if you get this facet here, Mana Thirst, and that's kind of the replacement, because if you pick this, you get attack damage bonus within 2500 range, which is a big range. So like, if there are just heroes entering a fight that have below 60% mana, which is what you get the attack bonus for, then you're going to just be getting extra damage in that fight, even if you're not attacking them. And then the Ags is still one of those things that's pretty good, where you can just send those illusions in to drain mana, and people are going to be casting spells. So you can just get more and more damage as the fight goes on, to be honest, if you pick this Mana Thirst. And that's really good for the max. I mean, this max damage makes it only go up to a certain level, but still, you can get a lot of damage with this hero instead of like, slowing them by default. And then one of the talents is that you will slow them, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Level 15, minus 1 second blink cooldown replaced with 40% slow on fully mana drained targets. So it's not something that happens at the beginning of the game, but if you get this Mana Thirst, I mean, you are going to just be doing more damage, which is pretty good. Now, the thing you do give up here, which is the Mage Bane's Mirror, which basically reflects spells with Counterspell. Now you can see here, it no longer reflects spells, it blocks them, which I think is not actually that big of a deal for the hero. I don't really think you're going to be going for this all that often. I mean, sometimes you would go for it in specific situations, and it is very situational. I think this Mana Thirst is the default. And really, it's like, yeah, if there's a Lion Hex and you reflect it, that's really good, because then you're just going to kill the lion. But for the most part, Counterspell is all about just making sure you're not getting stunned, making sure you're not getting locked down, or the thing is not happening to you, so that you can get out. That's honestly what happens a lot of the time. Or jumping in, using it when they're trying to counter initiate so it doesn't happen to you, and then you can just keep hitting and that kind of stuff. So I don't think this one's actually that big of a deal. I think people are just going to go Mana Thirst like every single time, especially in the beginning, because it's just the more fun, higher damage, better one overall for right now at least. Then Arc Warden is a little bit of a weird one because, I mean, I don't play Arc Warden. I don't really know much about him. So the first thing is ability effects no longer depend on the side Arc Warden plays for. Now he has, like, I mean, if you remember, if you're an Arc Warden player, if you remember the patches, they kind of switched how the Arc Warden hero and the Tempest double, like what they exactly do with attacks and like spells and all that kind of stuff. I forget all the specifics because I'm not an Arc Warden player, but it was really kind of interesting how they did that. And now it's basically flipped here with the facets. You can kind of like use order or disorder, pick which one you want, not just like where you are, which side you're on, Radiant or Dire. It's like, which one do you pick in the beginning? Then the passive is weird, like when you activate runes, you get regen rune for 4 seconds. I think this just makes this hero a mid more, like a carry, not a carry. I mean, he's kind of been more of a mid recently, but there has been times when he's a carry, but now he can just be a mid and just not even have a bottle and just rush Midas and stuff, which he does anyway usually. But now you get this extra regen rune buff 4 seconds by picking up any rune. Bounty runes and water runes not as much, but still, it's still very good for this hero mid. But then they changed some other weird stuff too, where like now Tempest double lasts for 60 seconds, but you actually take way more damage with the distance penalty. So like the Tempest double can just get killed really quickly, and then it restarts the cooldown if the Tempest double is killed by enemies. So it's way more punishing if that Tempest double gets killed. So it kind of just emphasizes you sticking together even more. And if you do stick together, you know, you have that Tempest double for 60 seconds, which is a long time. So it's not something you're just spamming all the time. It also makes, I think, well, I guess it doesn't really change Midas that much, maybe a little bit, but I mean, the downtime is not that crazy, especially once you max it out. It's only like 20 seconds, it seems, but still, it's just emphasizing more of like punishment for the hero and then forcing you to stick together, that kind of stuff, which I think is good, because it just sucks when you have this hero sitting in base and then he's like level 25, 30 or whatever, late game, he's just sending in his Tempest double and that's all he does. But now you can't really do that because he's just going to die instantly and then you can't summon another one for a very long time. So I like that. There's also some stuff with Magnetic Field with like the cheesiness of it isn't really there as much because now it's a level 25 talent where Magnetic Field affects buildings and creeps, where, you know, before you would just delay pushes constantly, even if it was 20 minutes in the game with this Magnetic Field. That was super annoying. Now it actually has to be later in the game for that to happen. So there are some things like that which are pretty cool too, to make it not as cheesy. And so I think I don't really know how this is going to affect this hero overall, if it's going to be bad or good, but it is making it less cheesy, which is a very good thing to me, I think, for most people, because this is really just a cheesy hero and it can be very annoying to play against. And then we have Axe here. So his innate ability is a passive, and basically he gets the Culling Blade bonuses kind of now as a passive. So it's just when he kills an enemy, he gets 1 permanent armor, and then if he kills with Culling Blade, he gets double that. So it's kind of just changing what Culling Blade does, giving it to him passively for any kill, and then if he does get those kills, it's still effective. Like, you still want to ult people, and that's still better for you, but it's just not always, like, if you get a kill without it, it's not as bad. So it's pretty good with that, which I always like these kind of things where you add stuff permanently. That's always cool with like Legion Commander and Slark. I like when they do these kinds of things. So this is pretty cool. I do like that. And then these facets are pretty interesting too, because one-man army, this is all about kind of jumping in and just killing people either by yourself, or if you have a lot of ranged heroes on your team, like let's say you pick Axe off lane and you see that you have like a Drow carry and, you know, a ranged mid and both of your supports are ranged. You say, okay, no one is ever going to be within like 600 radius of me if they're ever, you know, around me if I'm team fighting. So I can pick this, and it just makes me better overall because my strength is increased by 60% of my armor, and then it just makes you way tankier and way better overall. But if you ever have the situation where you're like, okay, there's a lot of melee heroes on my team, this isn't really going to be as effective, because if an ally gets close to you within 600 radius, it doesn't really do anything. So I'm just going to pick this, which increases my armor when I use Berserker's Call, and then taunted enemies gain 45 attack speed, so they're hitting me more, so I'm spinning more, and if there's blade mail, I'm doing more damage to them, which this is really good. So I think Call Out is kind of the default one that you would pick almost every time, but one main army can be very, very good, I think, in certain situations. Maybe they need to buff to 60%, because that sounds a little weird, just depends how much armor you have, but it can be good in some situations. Now, the other weird thing is they try to change some stuff here. You know, this armor's decreased, they changed the Agnum Scepter and the Shard, they kind of switched it around a little bit, but none of these things are really that crazy, except Agnum Scepter now also allows Counter Helix Counter to decrease when Axe attacks. So, you know, you're picking this Call Out, let's say, the enemy gets plus 45 attack speed, so they're attacking you way faster, so you are just getting way more spins. And now if you go like an attack speed build with your Ags, you will just spin infinitely and do like 1 billion mirror damage, which is pretty crazy. This is kind of cool. I like this because it gives you just another thing to do. It's not just going all tanky hoping they hit you. It's like, now I can spin by hitting you, which I think was kind of a thing before in some ways, but this is like way better, I think, with this scepter. And so all these things combined, I think, just make this hero pretty good right now. Pretty cool, but obviously we never know with what's going to happen. There's so many different changes, it's hard to say. I just think one main army is kind of a cool concept. We'll just see if it's actually good enough to be actually good. You know, something you're going to pick and not just pick Call Out every single game. So next we have Bane. So Bane is an interesting one. They increased strength, agility, intelligence, and then also his innate ability is a passive where he gains attributes in an evenly distributed way across all the attributes, no matter what. So like if you get an intelligence, like let's say you get, well, Scotty gives all stats, but let's just say you get heart, or you get Scythe of Ice or something. It sounds like when you get that, you get kind of those stats evenly distributed instead of just all in intelligence or all in strength, which is kind of interesting. I don't know how good that is. I mean, these universal heroes are pretty good, especially when they first came out, they were kind of broken. So we'll see how good that is. And that kind of leans into the facets here, which are Dreamstalker and Sleepwalk. Dreamstalker is all about like the right click damage version of Bane, so like a mid Bane, which has kind of become sort of a thing recently. So we'll see if this just becomes actually a real thing now, which is just giving you more attack speed. I mean, it also granted attack speed before, because now it says no longer grants bonus attack speed by default, but it's giving you more attack speed, which is pretty good. And 70 attack speed is a lot, so you can do a ton of damage and just be more of that mid Bane that you're just going carry kind of actual core Bane, which also probably helps with these things as well, because you're getting all of those stats, which is interesting. And then this is clearly just the support Bane. Nightmare is a vector target ability that causes people to walk in a direction. So now you nightmare them and they're kind of like walking towards you. If you nightmare somebody and they're right outside of tower range, you can make them walk into the tower. Now they're only walking at 75 speed, so it's really not that big of a deal. Like, it's not like they're running in a certain direction really fast, but still they kind of gradually come in that direction. And then, if that, like it says here, if another hero switches to the nightmare and tries to save them, they will also start walking that way. So it's just like an added extra thing. It's not just like they're stationary. But the other thing that's kind of weird about this is that also makes like Marana arrow and stuff harder to hit, but I don't think it's that big of a deal, because it's, like I said, it's only 75 speed. So just a little bit of a buff, and not super hard to hit other stuns. So that's Bane. Not super big. It just, I think, it makes this hero a little bit have, a little bit of an extra thing as a support and a better core. So it's become more of a core recently, so we'll see if that is something that keeps happening. Then we have Bat Rider. This hero seems like they just buffed it now like to an insane degree, and it's completely broken, because now just his attacks apply a debuff that deals 15% of attack damage every second for 2 seconds. So it's one of those things where it's like not happening for a long time, but every time you attack them, if you just increase the attack speed, they're taking a ton of damage. And then the other thing that happens is with this Arsonist build, it makes Sticky Napalm apply to buildings. Now it's dealing 25% of the damage, so still that's not the best, but still that's kind of insane. Like, you're pushing towers and doing damage to buildings now. That's kind of weird. But the other thing is, if you don't want to like go for that, then you can go for Stoked, which just does more damage, and because with the spell amp and increased movement speed basically when you lasso somebody, because it says whenever you use an ability or item on somebody that makes them move, so which is obviously lasso, then it just kind of builds up from there. So you jump in, you lasso somebody, and as you like kind of draw them away, you just get more damage amp and more movement speeds. You can draw them further and they take more damage, all that kind of stuff. The rest of this has just been adjusted kind of based on these things, not super like crazy here. It's just that sticky napalm, you know, the damage was increased, which is kind of crazy. The damage to creeps was decreased, obviously, to like account for some of this crazy stuff. And then the creep penalty now also applies to application damage. So like they did kind of try to adjust this here a little bit, but it just sounds a little crazy. I mean, it's one of those things that's so hard to see or to know just by looking at it and reading it. You have to actually see it in person, like see, you know, a 10k MMR plus player like play Bat Rider or whatever, find out the right build. Like that other time when, I don't know, a year ago, and they put Bat Rider Manta in or whatever, and it would just like one-shot people if to an insane degree with the shard or whatever. You just have to see what's going to happen with these. I don't know, maybe it's not good at all, but I just have this feeling that this is kind of broken, because whenever you tweak Bat Rider a little bit and make something a little bit broken, I feel like it gets very, very broken very quickly. So then we can go to Beastmaster here. Beastmaster just was changed a little bit. Inner Beast is just more like a innate ability now with the attack speed, and he's kind of focusing all on the attack speed here with Wild Hunt. This is just giving you attack speed to you and every single unit that you have if you have more units. So like basically the more units you have, the better. That's just like all in push strat. And then this beast mode is also about attack speed, but it's more just for yourself, and it's more about like your axes, because the wild axes, you're like applying that now with your right clicks, which is pretty good. And then also level 25, you have no wild axes cooldown. So like if you're going for that axe build, you can go this one. If you just want to go for all in push strat with all your little guys running around just pushing at an insane speed, you can go for the Wild Hunt. That's kind of the basics for the hero. I think the only other thing to mention is that the attack speed was rescaled, and now it only affects Beastmaster and his units, so it's not like a global thing. So he's not like a full team attack speed push. It's just more about like which one are you going for yourself. Then we have Bloodseeker. These are kind of interesting changes. Basically, his lifesteal on his Thirst was changed to be an innate ability now, so it's kind of removed from Thirst, and it's just something that happens. And it seems pretty good. Now, it's kind of complicated because it's like, it has all this stuff where it's like, when a unit is killed, 25 health plus 1% of the max health for his level. So basically, as you increase in level, you just get more lifesteal when units die, but it is less effective on creeps, reduced by 40%. And then you also heal when people get kills in an AoE around you. So just like if you don't get the kill, that's not as big of a deal. You're just not healing as much. And that's kind of the main stuff that's happening here. But then with the facets, there's a pretty cool one, which is this spray where rupture, when you rupture a target and you attack them, you kind of move in the direction that you're facing, which I feel like can kind of grief you a little bit, but obviously it's just going to make you amp up the damage even more, which is kind of cool. So like this hero just kind of runs in, attacks really quickly, and if you're rupturing a target, you're kind of trying to focus a target and you're man fighting a target, this allows you to man fight a target really, really well. It makes you probably one of the best man fight heroes in the game, to be honest, because this is pure damage, and pure damage can really never be counted out. And then Blood Rush, this is just more like an escape or a go in kind of thing. It's really honestly more of an escape, I feel like, because it just gives you double or 50% bonus speed, bonus movement speed for 5 seconds when you use it, but then afterwards you don't get that movement speed because you don't get any movement speed from Thirst because it goes on cooldown for a while. So that's kind of awkward. Like, I don't really like these, you know, passives or facets where it gives this negative aspect, because I feel like people aren't really going to choose that unless they really figure out, you know, when to use it, because honestly this isn't something that you're going to be using as a support, so why not just get this, and if you do attack people, because you're going to be a core anyway, you're going to attack the rupture target, it's just going to be better for you. Where this is mostly about escaping, it's kind of like a weird niche use. So that's honestly the biggest thing that happened with the hero. I don't think these changes are as crazy as some of the other, you know, changes. Honestly, it's really just the rupture change. Everything else seems relatively similar, honestly, not that big of a deal. Then Bounty Hunter, kind of an interesting one. They changed some things around, obviously, like with every hero, but they changed some things around where it seems like it's a lot different, but it's not totally different. For instance, Track used to give bonus damage to shuriken toss, and it used to apply critical strikes on your attacks and stuff like that, but now it just increases total damage, and that it still kind of does the same sort of thing, but really and then the passive just gives you extra bonus gold when you get an assist or a kill, which is similar to what happened in the past. I mean, with track, you still get bonus gold and all those kinds of things. It just amps up that even more for this hero. So it just does more of all the things that he used to do. Now, the big one here is through and through for the facet is shuriken damage slows all units it passes through, or damages and slows all units it passes through, which is interesting because maybe this allows the hero to actually farm. Like, this is something where you have to see if this is actually effective on creeps. Like, if you run up to the creep wave and then you cast shuriken toss on the ranged creep, and then it goes through all the melee creeps, it like does an insane amount of damage to them, kills the range creep or whatever, and now you can actually farm on the hero. That could be a huge change, because this hero just doesn't farm. Like, the way that this hero farms is by participating in kills and like tracking people and running up to them and stealing their gold. Like, that's the main thing that this hero does. But now if you can pair that with actually farming creeps, that's kind of going to be crazy. We'll see how good this actually is at the end of the day, though. And then if you just want to go all in for being super annoying, stealing people's gold, then you can just use this cut purse facet again to just do all that even more than you did before, because now you can steal gold every time he targets a hero with a spell. So now you're stealing gold when you track, which is kind of insane. Shuriken toss, all these other things, just crazy, amps up with the ags and all that kind of stuff. So this is sort of just like, if you pick this one, and with all the things that he is doing now and the small changes, it really just does all the same stuff Bounty Hunter did before, just like probably amped up a bit. But this one is the big one, because if this allows him to farm, that could really change the dynamic of the hero overall. Then we have Brewmaster. I'm not a huge Brewmaster player, but basically they just changed the Drunken Brawler to be an innate ability where you can get 5 levels, which just kind of changes the stats and stuff. They just adjusted all of these things. I'm not going to go into all that specifically because I don't really know how much that's going to affect the hero. But then the facets are kind of interesting. The Cinder Brew facet, where it just like makes it kind of a spell that you can cast in a direction and it hits people, it does more damage, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting. I don't know how good it is, like in practicality. I mean, 125 physical damage is not that good, but it is okay, I guess. 75 range barrel, it's kind of weird. I don't really know how effective this is. It kind of looks cool, I guess, but it's not the best. We'll just see in practice if this is actually good. I may be underestimating it. And then Drunken Master, when brewed up, Brewmaster moves with a varying amount of speed. This kind of already happened with one of his things, but now they're just like picking this one almost as a default, which is kind of weird and kind of interesting. They also changed some stuff here, which isn't that big of a deal. I mean, honestly, this is a lot of just like numbers, to be honest. Like, looking at Drunken Brawler, looking at Primal Split, it doesn't feel like they changed a lot about the hero other than giving it this roll out the barrel, and that doesn't sound that great. So I'm just not sure that this is all that big of a deal for Brew, but I could be wrong, honestly, just not being a Brew player. We'll have to, with a lot of these things, especially stuff like this, we're going to have to see it played by the good Brewmaster players to see if it's good or if it's underwhelming or what. And then Bristleback is a weird one because this is another one where you have a negative aspect to the facet. But basically Warpath is now an innate ability where you get multiple instances, which it just kind of gives you all of those, the same things it did before, that damage, the movement speed, all that kind of thing based on when you're casting abilities. So it's very similar, not really changed all that much. But now this Berserk thing, which is kind of interesting because you get increased attack speed, but then the damage that you get from Warpath is just capped at 5. So that's like half negative, half good, because obviously the attack speeds are really, really good. But then you just get that capped damage, which is kind of awkward, especially because you have to pick kind of which one, obviously in every game with every hero. And this Snot Rocket thing changes the dynamic of the hero as well in a weird way. Because now, you know, this Nasal Goo, it's just a little bit better. But the real thing is that Bristleback, the ability, instead of Quill Spray shooting out, it shoots out the Nasal Goo in a radius whenever the damage threshold is met. So in the past, you would kind of turn your back, you know, obviously in the fountains hitting you and you're killing all the enemy heroes, but now it's goo that's happening. Obviously, you can choose this one, and Bristleback still does the same thing, but then you have that negative of not getting that increased damage per stack. So it is one of those things that this might be a little bit of like, okay, what is the playstyle I'm going for? How exactly is this working? Because you're just doing less damage, more attack speed, but here it's all about like slowing people minusing their armor, all that kind of stuff. So it's just a little bit awkward, I think, on the hero, because it changes the dynamic of how the hero is going to be played kind of in both instances. Otherwise, not too much to say about other stuff like this. So we'll see how this actually ends up working out for Bristleback. But I feel like of all the ones I've read so far, I mean, there are some ones that are underwhelming, but this just feels a little bit awkward, honestly. And then Broodmother, I'm a little bit scared about this one because, I don't know, this sounds like it could be pretty good. I mean, bonus movement speed no longer decreases, or movement speed bonus no longer decreases with units' current health. I think I'm just skipping right to that one because that's kind of like annoying. Obviously, it doesn't give regen anymore, but like one of the things of this hero was like when you damaged him or her, she didn't like, she slowed down, easier to catch, all that kind of stuff. So it was like harder to run away. Now when you're just flying around at like a bajillion movement speed on your webs all the time, that's kind of crazy. And then also with these facets, now your webs are even better because the enemies have health regen decreased by a percentage, which is kind of insane. Or the feeding frenzy thing, which applies bonuses to all spiderlings under Broodmother's control, which is kind of crazy for insatiable hunger, so they're harder to kill. Now they don't have a lot of HP, so you can still probably burst them down, but that's still kind of crazy. And then the innate ability, it's just a passive that can be leveled up whenever she kills a unit. All of her units, her and all her units under control in a 600 radius, get fully stackable buff that heals them for 4% of the victim's health. This is almost like the Bloodseeker kind of thing, where you're just like, when you kill creeps and units and stuff, you get health. So it's a very similar kind of thing. And then the same actual thing is said for this one as with Bloodseeker, where it's like creeps. The effect is reduced on creeps by 40%. It's all that kind of stuff, and it's amplified by lifesteal amp and all that. So it's just interesting. They're giving like Broodmother a Bloodseeker passive, which is weird. So that's just like a straight up buff, and then all these things are really good. And then this not slowing your movement speed is also really good. And then they took away the Bolo, which was annoying, but now you kind of just get it with your basic attack because you get the slow and you get the mischance on the enemies and the attack damage increase. So it's like, are we just like giving insane buffs to Brood where this hero is absolutely broken right now? Especially because Spiderlings now create similar Spiderlings instead of Spiderites. So, I don't know, man. I just hope this hero is not broken right now because nobody likes to play against this hero. People like playing it, of course, if you're like a Broodmother spammer, but nobody likes playing against this hero, and it just worries me that this hero is going to be broken right now. And next we have Centaur. So Centaur is just like tripling, quadrupling down on being tanky. Basically every 2 minutes he just gets 40 health, which is kind of cool. I mean, I like that idea, like whatever. 40 health's not that big of a deal, but it's pretty cool. And then his facets are double edge, which basically this is kind of one of those where you take more damage, which this hero just likes taking damage, obviously, because he gets so much strength, all that kind of stuff. And then you deal way more damage with your double edge. So in the last 6 seconds, you can just amp up the damage to 100% bonus damage for double edge, and then you cast it kind of using all of that damage that you stacked up, which is pretty interesting. Or you can go for horsepower, which just gives you 40% of your strength as bonus movement speed. So if you don't really like this double edge thing, you don't feel like you're going to get attacked a bunch and then use that double edge, and you don't really like that, you can just straight up say, okay, I'm just going to get more movement speed, which is pretty cool, I guess. Kind of boring, but whatever. I mean, this might just be the better one if this one's not as good in some ways. But honestly, the big thing for this hero is that this Hitch a Ride, which has just been such a joke. Like, I don't think anyone has ever bought this in an unironic way. It's always like, what is going on? Like, this hero's been so good for the last few months, and I've just never seen the Ags. Like, I've seen it picked a bunch. I've never seen the Ags, because why would you ever get it? But now it grants invulnerability to the mounted target, which I think is pretty big. Now, it no longer ends when blinking and teleporting. That's also pretty crazy. So this can actually be good now, where before it was just super awkward. It felt really weird to use, but now it's like this weird save, and it's pretty good in a lot of different ways, especially because you are so tanky. You have your ult in general where you can just like, I mean, yes, the ult is helping somebody else run away too, but if you have like BKB or whatever, you can run away, you're super tanky, hard to bring down, all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty cool. I think this makes the Ags actually like legitimate, not just a meme anymore, which is cool. I mean, it's always good to see something that's been in the game for not so long, but like a year or so and just completely pointless. It's good to see them actually like using it and making it good now. Then Chaos Knight. This hero is a little bit awkward. It's another one of those awkward ones where this innate passive is kind of cool because you just get 50% chance to spawn another illusion. Now, I'm not 100% sure if every time you spawn an illusion, it just gives you another chance to spawn an illusion, so you can spawn like a billion illusions. Like, if you just get the lucky roll, you could just spawn 10 illusions with your ult. Like, I don't know if that's possible, but that could be, I mean, if that's the case, that's pretty cool. If you just get the, lucky draw and you just have like a million illusions running around, that's pretty cool. It just happens all the time. You don't have to pick it, which is interesting. Now, the weird thing is this Phantasmagoria, it just makes every illusion that you spawn a strong illusion, meaning it doesn't get it doesn't disappear if Lion hexes it or mana drains it or something like that. Where that used to be default on the Phantasm Ultimate, but now it's not default. So if you don't pick this, those illusions now can just die really easily. But this is kind of a choice now between these two, which irrationality means you get break or disarm on Reality Rift, and this hero's kind of been leaning towards more of that hero where it's something, an off lane or a 4 position even, where you're kind of supporting your team. You're not all about doing right click damage, being a carry, that illusion hero. You're really about Reality Rifting people and stunning them and stuff like that. So if you want to play more like that, you can get this one. If you want to play the traditional carry, clicking people to death and all that kind of stuff, buying ags or whatever, spawning a bunch of illusions, then you just get this one. So that's kind of cool. I do like it. It's just a little bit awkward because this one, the last thing I didn't mention is there's 20% damage reduction with the illusions within the 1200 radius, which is kind of just, I don't really love to see these negative aspects to these things, especially at this point where we just don't know what's going on. But I understand that this could be pretty broken if all the illusions are strong illusions. I get that. But still, it's kind of like annoying because that makes the illusions really good, but they're also kind of worse in a way. So it's almost like, well, break is really powerful, disarm is really powerful. So it might actually be that if there's nothing that just destroys your illusions instantly in the game, just very easily, like there's no lion or anything like that that just destroys them in a second, then you might just want to go for rationality like every game, just because it's going to be better in a lot of ways, because break and disarm are so good. So that is Chaos Knight. And now we have Chen. Chen is insane because you get all these different facets. Now, this is a little bit, when you first look at it, you're like, what? This is absolutely crazy, but it's actually not as crazy as you think. Basically, to summarize it, this hero's innate ability is that he gets to have one convert, basically one creep that he summons. It's like one big creep, kind of like the Centaur, Hellbear, Satyr, Troll, Wolf. So he gets one of those guys and he just gets to say, okay, I have this guy now, kind of thing. And he is my dude that is like my companion, my convert. And if you die, he also dies. Like, it's pretty cool. So you have to choose that at the beginning of the game, though. So that's kind of interesting because, like, Centaur is going to be the one I think people always get because this is just a stun. But, like, Wolf amps up damage, Troll pushes towers. It depends on what you want to do. I don't really know that anyone will pick either of these ever. Probably be one of these three. But still, this is kind of a cool thing. You just get one of these guys. And then he works in the similar way that he worked before. They did change some stuff here, but he still builds up the army, gets creeps, does all that kind of stuff. But, yeah, it's just an interesting concept, interesting thing. It's just, I think they're going to have to figure out a way to actually get people to pick the other stuff, because I just think people are just going to say, okay, I'm going to get the Centaur and like do that every single game, which is honestly going to be the default. Then we have Clinks. This here just spawns more skeletons. That's kind of something he already did, but now he does it even more, kind of. And then the two facets are, the Strafe is just buffed up because it gives more of like a man fight ability where the enemy, and including towers, which is pretty cool, now miss based on the stacks, which is pretty interesting based on the attacks you get. So 5% miss chance on their attacks, and every time you hit them and your skeletons hit and stuff, it amps that up, which is pretty good for man fighting, things like that. It's also really good for pushing towers. Like, you can straight up push towers alone, solo, even if the tower's hitting you, because you're just attacking it a million times. Now, it only lasts for the duration, or like up to 1 second after Strafe ends, and Strafe doesn't last very long, so you just have to keep that in mind. But then you're probably going to get this one almost every time because Engulfing Step is just super weird. I mean, it could be good, don't get me wrong, but like, I don't know, people are just going to have to figure out how to use this, because casting Death Pact makes it so you take the place of the thing you ate, basically, and now there's an archer where you used to be. So don't get me wrong, this can be good because like a mobility spell is pretty good. Now it is like a lower range, 700 range, which is not super far, but like, it just feels a little bit awkward. It can like grief yourself, I'm sure, in a lot of time, in like a lot of cases, because you're like a range guy, you're sitting back, right? You want to like Death Pact to creep in the lane. Now suddenly you're in the lane, the guy just turns on you and kills you. So I don't know, it's just kind of awkward. People are probably going to get strafe every time. Interesting idea though. We'll just see. I mean, if you can turn it off, that's kind of the big thing. Like, choose if that happens or not. Then we have Clockwork. I like this kind of thing. Outgoing damage is increased by 0.3% per armor that you get, which is kind of interesting. I don't know how relevant that is. I don't know if that's like a huge deal, like this hero is getting a ton of armor. It's just, I mean, you want to buy more armor then, which is great, because that helps the hero. And I think that's a cool thing to do, for the hero with the way it's played, because it obviously goes in, you want to be tanky, but we'll see how effective that is. 0.3%, not crazy, honestly, but you do get a decent amount of armor throughout the game. The cool stuff is, though, that hookshot is better for saving yourself now because it's 75% cooldown reduction when you use it as like a way to escape if you hit an ally, which is pretty interesting. And then, or if you honestly just hit an ally when you're going in, because that can happen too, where you hit an ally, let's say you have an axe on your team and the axe jumps in and he calls a guy and then you jump in but you hit the axe instead. Like that could be good, because actually be like a skill shot to do that instead, because you're still stunning a guy like on the way to him, but you have a decreased cooldown, which is pretty interesting. Then the other interesting one too is this expanded cogs. So the cogs are actually bigger now, and then they actually push enemies back when they like run to the cogs. Like, so on the outside of the cogs, obviously if the enemy runs into them, it kind of pushes them back and mana burns them. But now that's happening in the inside of the cogs too, which is kind of weird. And then also when you hit the cogs, you like push the cogs back, and it can destroy trees inside the cogs when cast and all that kind of stuff. It's just interesting that they did this to the hero. I wonder if this is going to be good, if it makes the hero really good, like broken more, honestly, because it's like harder to escape from the cogs. I'm not sure. This could honestly make the hero really good. I mean, it was already getting picked a lot more, which I was surprised by, because it didn't get like too many buffs, I felt like. It got some buffs here and there, but this could be a big one, honestly. It could be like, now, I think the big thing is like, does Force Staff allow you to get out still? I wonder, because honestly, I think in the past, like you could Force Staff into the cogs, and it would like push you out. Like it wouldn't like allow you to actually force yourself in. So if you can't counter this anymore with Force Staff, that would be huge. Yeah, it would just be kind of crazy. Then we have CM. This one's a little bit more boring because you're just getting, mana amp on yourself innately. So that used to happen on Arcane Aura, but now it's not happening anymore. Like it happens a little bit, but not as much. So that's kind of like boring, and all the stuff, the change isn't that big of a deal. I think Freezing Field no longer giving you armor is a pretty big nerf, to be honest. I mean, this hero is really good, so it makes sense, but like that's kind of nerfs the hero overall a lot. So I don't think this will see much of this hero because of that nerf, to be honest. But these changes, because like everything else is being buffed, and these changes aren't that big of a deal. Like this cast range is increased and provide a bigger aura if you choose this. I don't know how. I mean, it's obviously good, don't get me wrong. It's just not crazy. And then this Cold Comfort, this can actually be pretty interesting and pretty cool, because allied heroes within the aura's close radius receive a percentage of mana spent whenever you cast a spell. That's pretty cool. Like if you have a lane partner where you're just like spamming spells a lot, that can be really good for just like amping up their mana regen. So, and then you're obviously getting a point or so in Arcane Aura, which is good, but it just feels awkward. This hero doesn't feel like the buffs or the changes are that crazy. Like they're kind of just giving you something you already had, and then they're taking away that armor. So I feel like Crystal Maiden's kind of in the dumpster now, but we'll see if that's actually like true going forward here. And next we have Darkseer, who has a new innate ability where you basically just increase your intelligence based on strength and agility. So your intelligence can't be lower than either strength or agility. So if you buy like strength or agility items, your intelligence just automatically goes up. So it's like more incentivized to buy agility and strength items, honestly, because you don't need to worry about intelligence, which is kind of interesting and cool. It's a kind of cool, unique take on the hero, especially then mixed with the facet where you gain 0.5 attack speed per each point of intelligence. So if you get tanky strength items and agility items to increase your attack speed, you can maybe become like a right-click hero, I guess, if you have a bunch of intelligence. Kind of weird, awkward, I don't know. Maybe you just buy intelligence items and click people. The thing is, I feel like people are going to go this quick wit every single time, though, because Heart of Battle is the other facet, and you just decrease your movement speed to 275, but you get more movement speed depending on the allied heroes, 8% per hero in a 900 radius, but that's like not very good. I just feel like that's like weird. Why would you give yourself this negative? I don't really love these negative ones where people, especially now where people like don't know what's going on, they're just going to pick the one that's not negative like every single time. That's kind of the weird part of the hero, is it's just pretty straightforward. I do like it. It's kind of interesting with this intelligence thing, but otherwise you're just going to go quick wit. We'll see if like right click Darkseer becomes a real thing. Then we have Dark Willow, who gets more regen, health, and mana when she is untargetable, basically when she goes into Shadow Realm. And then Throwing Shade is just about increasing damage dealt while in Shadow Realm, but it's only in like the 600 radius, which is not very big. So that's kind of interesting because you can obviously do a lot of damage in that, but one of like the main carry builds or whatever is to just have insane range, hit people from a million years away. So that's not really helping you there. So that's just like a little bit awkward. Do you want to like go into melee range when that's happening? It's hard to really say. And then the other one that's just going to be like the default, especially for the support Dark Willow, is just Thorny Thicket, which just makes your brambles better because you get more brambles. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, they last 50% less, but they take, the enemies take more damage, which is it's pretty cool. I mean, there's really no downside to it. You just take this by default every time, unless you want to get Throwing Shade, which is just more like offensive carry, maybe like mid Dark Willow based. And then these other things, not really a huge change to the abilities. I mean, they kind of some just adjustments there, but nothing crazy. Then Dawnbreaker, another interesting one, and I think a lot of these heroes that do play support and, off lane, or support and carry, support and mid, support and core in general, they have like two facets that just make the hero, like which one do you want to pick? And Dawnbreaker is another one. We saw Dark Willow was one. It just seems like a lot of these heroes are having that, which I think is really cool. Now, the innate ability is the one that was kind of teased, where whenever the sun rises, Dawnbreaker gradually reveals the entire map to your allies over 4 seconds, and then Fog of War returns 1 second after that. That's pretty cool. I mean, it's a unique idea. I don't know. It seems kind of broken though. Like, you just get to see the whole map where everyone is. That's a lot of information. That's really, really valuable. But obviously, it only happens every 5 minutes, so it's not like a huge deal. But it is pretty good when it does happen. And then Solar Charged is the one that it's going to be more of an offensive, like core based facet, where every time you hit a target with your powered up Luminosity, you decrease your cooldowns every time. So if you're getting more attack speed, if you're using this a bunch, you just get more cooldowns. Like, you just get to use your abilities way more, which is pretty good, obviously, because if you have attack speed on the hero, you're hitting a bunch, and then you get to use all of your abilities a ton. That's just good. It's very straightforward with that. And obviously this hero didn't really buy attack speed in the past, but now this just makes attack speed better, honestly. Then this one, Gleaming Hammer, is more of a support-based one where you throw the Celestial Hammer out. It just kind of heals in an AoE. So this is more of a support facet, but I don't really know that it's that good. I mean, it's like fine, but I mean, you can play the support Dawnbreaker where you're healing, you're buying ags, you're doing all that kind of stuff, and this just helps amp that up because you're not going to be hitting people a bunch. So, I mean, I get that, but still, I just don't know how good this one is. So we'll see how that affects Dawnbreaker. Nothing too exciting there, though. Then Dazzle, the innate ability is just that kind of thing that Dazzle's been doing for a long time. Is every time you cast a spell, it just like reduces or buffs armor. It does both of those things for allies and enemies, kind of obviously depending which one it is. If your ally's not getting negative armor, obviously they're getting more armor and the enemy's getting negative armor. And then the facets, this one, the Novel Boon, is basically granting a damage barrier if you heal over like max health, which is pretty cool because, if you want to heal somebody, and those damage barriers are kind of insane. So you kind of are able to heal people past full health, and then you can refresh it instead of adding on to it, you will refresh it if you heal them again, which is pretty cool. I mean, I kind of like that idea. That's interesting. But then you also have this more offensive one, which is Poison Bloom, which basically when you attack somebody 4 times with Poison Touch on them, it just kind of like does a bunch of damage to them and explodes in an AoE and kind of leaks to other people. That's sort of like a Lifestealer's Shard. So it's similar to that kind of thing. It's just which one do you think you're going to be going for? This is obviously the support one. This is obviously the offensive one, but this could still be good if you're doing an offensive one, because how many times are you attacking them? Are you attacking them 4 times? I don't know. I mean, maybe if you're doing like mid Dazzle, you will be, but we'll see if that kind of comes back into play. But I do like that. Again, one of those where it's support or core. Then Death Prophet. This hero feels like it's been broken for a long time, like 6 months to a year ago. And what I mean is, like, this hero was so good forever, and now I have not seen it for a million years. So we'll see if this like brings it back. The weird thing about this hero is you're gaining movement speed per level, which is just kind of boring, whatever, it's fine. And then reducing cooldown of abilities per level, which is cool, that's great, but again, pretty boring. And then the Facet Suppress applies movement speed slow to affected units of silence, which it used to do that. Now, like, I don't know, that's also super boring. The cool one, which people are going to pick every time, is Spirit Collector. So when any hero dies, basically on your team or on the enemy team, you get a charge. And then when you use Exorcism the next time, you kind of release all of those spirits spirits of those heroes as one of your little spirits that come out, and then they do extra damage basically, which is pretty cool. And then if someone dies while exorcism is going, they kind of are replaced. One of the spirits is replaced by them. This is a pretty cool idea. I like the idea. It is. We'll see if it's really strong. It seems strong, but obviously this is for snowballing. It's also a little bit of like a kind of comeback mechanic too, because if people are dying around you a lot, if you're participating in team fights and your supports are feeding or whatever, then you will have a better ult next time. So it's kind of a little bit of a bonus in that way, as long as they're feeding near you, which then you have to not die obviously too. I mean, if you do die, obviously you can use exorcism later, but in any case, it's kind of a cool idea. Again, people are probably going to pick this one every single time because this one is so boring. And then nothing else really here is super interesting, just kind of some adjustment changes based on your passive now. Then we have Disruptor. Now, this is super weird because his innate ability, like, kind of makes him more tanky in a way by just, like, pushing people back. So whenever Disruptor takes more than 250 damage from enemies within 400 range, all nearby units are pushed to a 400 unit distance from Disruptor. So he just has, like mini Force Staffs, or not Force Staffs, but just, like, what is that, Havoc Hammer or whatever? Like, that item that no one ever buys. It's kind of like a mini one of those that just innately happens. So, like, if you are a melee hero and you're trying to kill Disruptor, it's going to be very hard, which is kind of cool but kind of annoying. Like, this is going to be really hard to kill this support without like a BKB or something. So that's kind of weird and interesting, just maybe really annoying in a way that just doesn't seem fun, but whatever, it is what it is. And then this Facet Thunderstorm, super boring, no one's ever going to pick it. I mean, actually people will pick this not because it's fun, but because Kinetic Fence is super weird and can actually just like grief you, because obviously Kinetic Field is really good because it like traps people in your ult, but this Kinetic Fence replaces Kinetic Field with just like a single line, kind of like a Darkseer ultimate, but it's more that you can't pass through it. Which can obviously be good in certain circumstances, like high ground or whatever, or like blocking people off from running off like up and down cliffs. So it can be very good, but I just feel like it's kind of weird and awkward, especially since you're like deciding to change out Kinetic Field at the beginning of the game. If you're just like, I don't want to do that, that sounds grief, you're just going to go for the Thunderstorm one, which is kind of like boring, but it is what it is. I like this new ability, and this thing is pretty cool, but this is kind of just not creative. Then Doom, kind of a pretty interesting one. They brought back the like level death, but level pain. Just if you are scaling well, if you're just like farming and have high level, which is what this hero does, then you just do more damage, but it's like attack damage, which you don't really attack people all that much, but you can run them down. That's definitely something he does, but it's just not like crazy. It's not like all damage is amped up by 10%, just attack damage. And then Gluttony is interesting because you get 2 Devour charges, which is pretty good. This is obviously, I think, kind of like the default one that people are going to pick. But then Devil's Bargain is super interesting because you get 90% of the gold back when you sell an item, which is just, that's something that I feel like has never been in the game before. Now, buyback costs a lot more, but this kind of like, if the negative aspect is just outweighed by the fact that you can sell items. But that's just super weird. I don't know if this is broken or what, but that just sounds like something that has never been in Dota before, and it's kind of like dangerous to add something like this because I just don't know how it's going to be used. I feel like someone's going to find how this is just absolutely broken in some weird way where you can buy something and you lose like barely any gold, and then you can just sell it immediately, like buy a lot of early game items, snowball out of control, and then you don't care about selling them. Like it's just awkward and weird, but I like the idea because it's kind of unique and interesting. But who knows, it might be annoying and, like I said, broken. So that's Doom, interesting one there. And then Dragon Knight is one of these that's kind of like a Chen, where a lot of these, like, you can pick which one, and it does have impact, but it's not like a huge deal. I mean, obviously with the Disruptor, like if you get Kinetic Fence and it's a bad game for it, like you're griefing yourself. But ones like Dragon Knight or Chen are like, you're picking something that is just for the whole game. You better be picking the right one, especially with Dragon Knight, because in the past, your ultimate was leveled up and you would get the splash damage and the poison damage and then the slow, and you would have all that innately, but now you have to pick which one you want. So that's kind of cool because you get it just basically when you level up this new ability called Worm's Wraith, and you get it in your human form. So it just adds that extra buff, which is pretty cool because Dragon Blood is now gone. It's now your innate ability, so you're just more tanky with more regen and armor just by leveling up in general. So that's pretty cool. And then you can have it on your main hero, like the buffs from the alt or the old alt or whatever. But you have to pick which one you want. So that's kind of interesting. Like, obviously, they were scaled up in a way where the Frost Dragon one was kind of like, I guess you could say, the best. But but are you really going to pick that? I don't know. It's like hard to say. I feel like people are just going to go for the best one or the last one first now all the time, but I don't know if that's necessarily better. I mean, obviously the Fire Dragon is really good for farming. Corrosive Dragon is really good for annoying, harassing people and all that kind of stuff. And then Frost Dragon is good for like slowing, man fighting, all that kind of thing, like in team fights, hitting people. So I don't know. It's kind of awkward because you have to pick the right one in the beginning, and if you pick the wrong one, you're just kind of screwed. So I don't know. I mean, obviously you have to judge on matchups and stuff, or maybe just everyone picks Fire Dragon because you just like farm. You know what I mean? Like, oh, now I'm a Sven. I'm just like Dragon Sven. So like maybe that's just all people do, and that's all it is. Otherwise, not too much changed here that needs to matter, that you need to worry about, other than, you know, that Worm Wraith replaced the Dragon Blood, but now it's a passive. So, and we kind of already talked about that. So nothing crazy there. Then lastly, for these heroes, the D heroes, which if you haven't noticed by now, I'm going by letter, so who knows how long this will take, maybe like an hour and a half, because I'm going through every single hero, and I feel like each letter is taking 10 minutes, which is kind of insane. But Drow used to have this precision aura ability before they changed the hero up, and it used to be like global, and it would give people bonus agility and stuff. But now it's just like an innate passive where you get bonus agility, and you give bonus agility to people in an AoE around you, which is pretty cool. So that's just, I know, an amp up for the hero. And then you also do more damage from high ground, which is really good for defensive positions, like if you're defending high ground, which is another thing this hero does really well. But also now with the shard, you kind of get that high ground position, so you're just doing way more damage up there, which is really good. That's kind of like a default one I think you can pick every game. But then sidestep is one you can also pick a lot of games too. I just don't know how good it is because you can move with multi-shot. Now you still aim in the same direction, but you can still move. That could definitely be good in a lot of circumstances, of course. But is it something where you're just going to like take that damage amp of 20%? And you're just going to not have that because you can move with multi-shot? I don't know that that's really all that good. Like I said, it can be good in some spots, but it just doesn't feel like it's something that you're going to sacrifice for. And then all these things just adjusted based on all this stuff, like bonus agility for allies, move to innate ability, that kind of stuff. There's not super crazy things happening here. And now we're moving on to the E's with Earth Spirit. So basically Stone Remnant remains as like an innate ability that you have, like that's always been the case. But now you kind of have two different kinds of ways to play the hero. You have this more like offensive way where the remnants have a duration of 60 seconds. You have 7 charges, kind of like similar to before. And then you do way more bonus attack damage when you use your magnetize, and it hits people and stuff like that. So it's just kind of more offensive core based. But then you have Stepping Stone, where the Stone Remnants have a duration of 20 seconds, so they don't last as long, but they don't have any charges, so you can just keep using them, so you don't have to really care about it that much. And the cooldown is 4 seconds, so you just use it a bunch. Mana costs only 15, so not very much. And then the Rolling Boulder no longer destroys remnants, so you just have remnants like all over the place. So just more of like the 4th position, you know, constantly rolling in, doing a bunch of stuff. Now it's maybe not as like good in the sense that there is a 4-second cooldown, so it might just actually be better with the way people play Earth Spirit to pick this one, because you can just use a bunch of remnants at the same time, you know, for multiple things that you're going to be doing with your abilities. So we'll have to see. I don't really know. I'm not an Earth Spirit player, so I don't know how many instances it's like, oh well, I need to use like 3 remnants within 4-second window because it's just better to do the roll and then the pull and then the this and then that, where this just makes it you're not able to do that anymore. So I just want to use this, even if I'm not going for that offensive attack damage, like I just need my remnants to be available. I don't know how relevant that is. You know, obviously I've played against Earth Spirit, but like, is it really that bad that it's a 4-second cooldown? I just don't know. I'm not sure. But that could be the big thing that I think makes this not viable, and that people might just pick this all the time. That's honestly the biggest thing with that hero. Then Earthshaker's like a funny one. Aftershock is just an innate ability, and then Tectonic Buildup just makes this better with every 10 levels. But the funny part is the Slugger one, where basically when you kill an enemy with Enchant Totem, they just go flying. So the creep just like flies in a direction, just like does damage in that direction. You're just like hitting them with a baseball bat, and they're just like getting hit out of the park, which is kind of hilarious and funny and cool. I mean, it's pretty awesome. And then if it's a hero, the same thing happens. They're just like flying through the air, and they take a ton of damage, which is, it's pretty awesome, honestly. I love that they added this. I feel like this is obviously the one people are just like by default, but then people are just going to keep picking this because it's just hilarious. I think that's really what it is. Then Elder Titan, pretty boring one. Astral Spirit's now an innate ability, and then you have this Deconstruction, which just like makes it better when they're under the effect of natural order, just increases up to 20 stacks every single time they're like in that AoE. But then this momentum one is kind of like awkward, where you just have attack speed decrease, but your attack speed is increased based on your movement speed, which this hero can get really fast. So that is something that can be pretty good and be beneficial later on when you're playing like Core or Elder Titan or something like that. But it's just pretty boring. I mean, Astral Spirit's already there. You're just amping up what you're already doing. I don't know. It's just a little bit of an awkward one. People are probably just going to pick Deconstruction most of the time, to be honest, anyway. Then we have Ember. Flame Guard now at innate ability, but nothing crazy has changed with this. Did you just get it from default? I think the big thing with heroes like this, where they just get this ability by default now, it's like, okay, well, do I really want to put more levels in this? Like, do I have to? Obviously, in certain situations where you need it, especially with Ember, because it's all about like farming. In some lanes, it's all about sustaining and harassing when you're just like in melee matchups or whatever. I mean, it can be very good, but having that one point can be really, really value when you can just like put a bunch of points in Sleight of Fist and then 1 point in chains and all that kind of stuff. So it can be pretty good. I think that's like a big thing with a lot of these heroes, obviously. But then with the facets, Sleight of Fist, it just kind of amps up your damage, because you're doing more damage if you Sleight of Fist 2 heroes. The one closer to you takes more damage, which is just pretty cool all around. But then the other option is, instead of just doing way more damage, you get an easier Searing Chain land. So like basically before, not that it was that hard to do it, but it was a little bit more difficult, especially if there's a lot of creeps around and stuff like that, where now Searing Chains are cast next to Fire Remnants. So if you like throw out a Remnant, you obviously go to that Remnant, then you can chain them, all that kind of stuff. But now if you just throw it out, you can just Searing Chains them without even getting there first. Or you can like throw one out at somebody, chains them, and still fight the person that you're next to or whatever, and then go to that other person later or whatever. So there's a lot more things you can do with this, where this just amps up your damage. I think this just kind of ups the skill cap of the hero even more, makes people just have more skill plays, which is always really cool, because this is such a high skill cap hero. You can just do so much with it. This increases that a lot. So I think obviously with lower ability, worse players are going to pick double impact, but with the high skill players, I think this chain gang thing is pretty cool and will be picked a decent amount. Enchantress is a super weird one, because you just get basically a neutral item when you basically, if you get a neutral item from a neutral creep, you get another one if it's available. And now enchanting a neutral creep gives a neutral token if available, so kind of like a Midas. But that's just like, okay, I mean, I guess is that something Enchantress needed? Is that really even interesting or cool? Like, they're just so boring. Does anybody really care about neutral items? Like, no, I just don't know that's like, if I was an Enchantress player, I'd be so mad, because I'm like, this is the worst passive of like any hero that I've read so far. So it's just so boring, and like, I don't care about neutral items. Like, why are you doing this to me? Now the facets are kind of cool, because this one just makes you more tanky. Whenever you take 250 damage, you get a wisp around you, so you can get 4 wisps around you. So this hero is already hard to bring down because of like the attack speed slow and all that kind of stuff. So it just makes it even better for you, because you're already healing. If you get your heal off, now you're healing even more as you take more damage. Pretty annoying for enemies. And then this Spellbound one is all about doing more attack damage, like because you get attack range when the enemy is enchanted and stuff like that. But I don't know, it's just kind of awkward, because you're not always going to be using enchant on enemies when you're right clicking them. And obviously this cast range isn't like super far either. So it's just a little bit awkward, I feel like it's not really doing a ton. I think people are just going to choose to be more tanky, and you don't really have to worry about it at all. You're just like, I'm even tankier now. Otherwise, yeah, kind of boring. I don't know why they did that to the hero. I feel like this is one that they just phoned it in. They were like, whatever. Then Enigma, interesting that his passive is just like damage reduction when people are close to him, which is kind of weird. I mean, that's like an odd one, especially because he's not really the kind of hero you would think where people are just going to group up around him on his own team. It's like he goes in when people are grouped up and black holes them on the enemy, but like now people want to stick around Enigma. I know that he does like buy auras in some patches and stuff too. I mean, that does make sense. So maybe that just like amps up that play style, especially with the splitting image facet, where now when he takes damage, you just summon these Eidolons, which is pretty interesting, because now it just makes this hero more of like a pusher and things, and now you can get these little guys running around when you take damage. I don't really know how relevant that is. And even this event horizon thing, where you get move speed slow when people are moving away from you in a 600 radius, I guess that helps with like, casting black hole and doing stuff like that. It's just a little bit awkward. I don't know. These things feel, another one that's a little bit phoned in, like not thought through all that much. I just don't feel like they're that fun or exciting. It's just kind of like whatever. Like, I don't really think splitting image does much, to be honest. Like one little Eidolon, whatever. And next we have Faceless Void. So the weird thing about this hero is this innate ability and also this time zone ability. So basically, attack projectiles are slowed when they fly near Faceless Void. By like this percentage, which is leveled up with Chronosphere, which is super weird. I mean, I don't really know. Like, we'll have to see how that looks in the game and what it really means, especially with like everything, like, you know, they're attacking you, and especially with this temporal impunity, which gives you basically 1 second after Time Walk is cast to backtrack any damage. So if stuff is like coming at you slowly, I guess you can just like Time Walk quick to be immune from damage for a second. It's just a little bit awkward, weird. I don't know. It's just kind of like an interesting idea, but I don't know how like good it is or how if it's going to be annoying or what. And then this time zone thing, replacing Chronosphere with time zone. That's extremely crazy because Chronosphere is just like an iconic ability. It's really good. Honestly, it's one of the things that makes the hero. But I don't know, maybe support Faceless Void is going to be a thing now because you're like changing everybody's attack speed, cast speed, projectile speed, movement speed, turn rate, all this stuff, amping it up for your allies, making it worse for your enemies. Now, obviously, all of his other abilities are more like well, I guess his time dilation is kind of a support-ish ability, so who knows? Maybe this is going to be like a support hero. I don't know. Very weird, very awkward. I don't know why you would really choose this instead of your Chronosphere. I just don't. I mean, maybe we'll have to see how it works in game, if it's like going to be really good, and just like it almost works like a mini Chronosphere because it's slowing them so much they can't turn, they can't do anything else, but then it's amping up everything your allies do and they don't get like stunned in there. You know, maybe that's really good. I don't know. It's just, we'll have to see it in action for it to actually be judged whether it's good or bad, because Chrono is such a good ability. So yeah, kind of a weird one, but we'll see how that plays out. Then we have Grimstroke, which is giving people like weird little mini Slardar ultimate where you can just get vision of them, or like a mini track for 4 seconds whenever you attack them or whenever you use Stroke of Fate, which is kind of weird. I don't know. That's kind of something I wouldn't think to be on the hero for some reason, but I mean, it is what it is. And then now they made Inkswell, the fact that you can like activate it to stun whenever you want, they made that something you actually have to choose, which is kind of a weird nerf to the hero. I mean, the hero is decent, but like, I don't know why they changed that. I don't know, it just kind of feels like something that should just be innate to Inkswell and just give him a different facet. But then the other one, if you don't want to pick that, is that Stroke of Fate is now a vector target ability that you can curve the trajectory. This is one of the things that was hinted at, I think, on the like gold plate or whatever, you know, before the patch came out, that people were wondering, oh, people were going to, you know, you're going to curve Pudge's hook, but this is actually the one that's going to be curved here. I don't know. I feel like you're just going to always use this Inkstigate because it's just good and it makes Inkswell. I mean, this hero was like not playable when they changed Inkswell to have a longer duration, and then you couldn't do this. And then once they changed it to be like, okay, you can trigger the stun whenever you want, it became instantly playable again. So just a very awkward thing. I don't know why they did that. Not super happy with the changes to Grimstroke there. Then Gyro, another weird one, kind of like Doom, where you can disassemble most items at all times and sell any recipe for full cost. Like, I don't know, that's so weird, dude. I don't understand. This is kind of like one of those things with the respawn timers where it's just like, okay, let's just throw this in here and see what happens. I mean, it's a cool idea, don't get me wrong. I think it's an interesting idea, creative, whatever, but just like, maybe it's not creative because it's just kind of like, oh, look, let's just do this. I don't know. We'll see how this affects the hero. I don't know. Maybe it won't do anything, but it's just really weird. And then Call Down, you just get like an extra missile dropping, just doing extra damage when it hits somebody, which is obviously good. And then Afterburner with Rocket Barrage, you just get increased movement speed whenever you hit people with this Rocket Barrage, which just helps you stick on them even more. Now, you don't get slow resistance anymore, which, you know, that makes it a little bit worse, but still, this is just really good for that kind of spellcasty Gyro. And then I've even seen Gyros like max out or get a lot of points in Rocket Barrage, even when they're going carry Gyro and just dominating lanes. Especially now that you have like the missile and everything, and this ability is pretty good. So I just think this stuff is not that interesting. It's more just like, what is this selling recipes stuff? I don't know, that's crazy. Then we have Hoodwink. Basically now you just kind of have like an innate passive evasion, essentially, because you redirect attacks into trees within 275 units, and that's just like an innate passive thing that you have. So you're basically a phantom assassin now, which is interesting. But Scurry no longer gives that evasion near trees, and it no longer increases attack and cast range by default. You have to pick Go Nuts here as a facet. Then the other thing that you can pick is this tree bounce trick shot, which basically makes your acorn shot hit trees if there's nothing else to hit, which is actually pretty cool because I think this is really powerful because now you can just like use acorn shot when you're against like a single support in the lane and there's trees around you everywhere. It's going to bounce back and forth. Like that's really good because it's going to choose the hero and I think the creeps before it chooses a tree. So it's going to hit the hero, see there's nothing else to hit, like no other creep or hero, and then it's going to hit a tree, and then it's going to hit the hero. It's just going to go back and forth, which is kind of insane. I feel like that's pretty broken, honestly. And this one doesn't really matter as much. I mean, the cast range and attack range is good, but like you now have that passive here where you're just super tanky and have this basically evasion. So I don't really know that that's a big deal, honestly. So this seems super broken. Hoodwink was already really good. Then we have Huskar, which is an interesting one because now he has no mana and all of his abilities use health, which is a cool idea. I actually really like this change with this hero. It's a really interesting and unique thing, kind of like what they did to Medusa. Now, Medusa was broken back then, but I don't think this is like when they first introduced it, I mean, and I don't think this is going to be that broken. Like they didn't change this to make it like insanely broken. It's just like a cool concept and it makes sense for the hero where he just doesn't have mana, doesn't really use it that much anyway either. Like everything else was costing health except for like Inner Fire, so might as well just make Inner Fire cost health too. And then the two facets are not super interesting. This one is just like Life Break. It just does more damage in an AoE and movement speed slow and stuff. Attack speed slow, actually, not more damage, but still just kind of like affecting enemies in the AoE when you use it. Or it like heals people in the AoE when you use it. So it can just be like good for your team or really good against the enemy. Just kind of depends. And then otherwise, the big change is that Inner Fire no longer disarms enemies, but now silences them, which is kind of interesting because the disarm was the big thing because obviously people are going to try to right-click you to death and you get a lot of magic resistance and even more magic resistance now, especially because your abilities are costing a bunch of health. Like this Burning Spear is costing even more health. So because of that, you don't want people to attack you, but if they cast abilities, it's not a big deal. But now they can't cast abilities, so you're kind of like doubling down on that thing that you already were good at, if that makes sense, because right-click damage against you was better than casting a spell because you were already super resistant to it. So that's just a little bit awkward. If anything, I think this is cool, but I don't think it makes this hero good. I think this actually is a pretty big nerf to it, and then plus this and all that kind of stuff, and now you have to use health. I just think this hero's nerfed, but I like the changes, even though it's not very good. Plus, people don't like when Huskar's good anyway, because it just like is super annoying. Then next we have Invoker. This one's not really one that I play, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but the cool thing is he gets more experience when he denies creeps, so he's becoming like a lane dominator. He already can kind of dominate lanes in some matchups and stuff, but now it's like really just an exponential gain. When you're denying creeps, it's even better for you in the long run, so like this can kind of snowball out of control. So we'll see if that alone makes this hero really, really good. But then all this other stuff with the Quas, Wex, Exhort, you're kind of picking which one you want to use, whether you're getting like damage per second, attack speed, bonus attack damage, or you're getting this lifesteal, movement speed, or increased spell damage. So it's like, I'm not an Invoker player. I don't know which one's better. It probably just depends on the playstyle, what you want to do that game, all that kind of stuff. And then a lot of decreased cooldowns for all of these spells. So that's kind of interesting. So they did change a little bit of how the hero works. I'm not really sure how relevant that is or what that exactly does to the hero, like I said, because I'm not an Invoker player. And then next we have Io, and this is pretty straightforward. The weird thing is the innate ability gives one less second channel to watchers for your whole team, and then the watchers under your control give you more vision, which is kind of cool, I guess, because this hero's all about ganking and things like that and traveling around the map. But then the facets are pretty straightforward. Like this is just offensive attack speed, spell amp for overcharge, and then defensive with armor and magic resistance for overcharge. So which one do you value more? Just like what kind of game is it? If you're picking this hero, you see what your team's picks are, and then you say, okay, well, this one is the one that I'm going to need more this game because the hero I'm linking with is a hero that's not really going to use the attack speed very much or the spell amp or whatever. So I'm just gonna, it's all about keeping them alive, and that's what I'm gonna do. Or it is all about just doing insane attack damage or whatever, and just like hitting people for 1 billion attack speed and amping up the spells. And that's pretty much what the change is for that hero. Not super exciting, but pretty straightforward. Then Jakiro is a pretty pretty interesting one. I like how they did this. They kind of gave this hero 2 attacks now because it has 2 heads, obviously. So whenever you attack a target, you kind of release 2 attacks. They do 50% damage, so it's kind of like the same as hitting 1 attack, but it's just interesting because it's like different. And then one of the attacks ignores melee hero's default damage block. So that's kind of cool. It's just like an interesting thing that the hero can do that is different from other heroes. Then the facets now change the spell Liquid Fire to Liquid Frost. It's like either one, and then the shard upgrades that ability and makes it even better. Now the big thing is that it kind of does a lot of the same stuff that Liquid Fire did, and then Liquid Frost is a lot of like slowing and that kind of thing. It's pretty straightforward. You can read more about it. I'm not going to go into all the detail and read every single thing there, but really the important part I think about this is that it doesn't affect buildings, either one. And although I like the changes in the concept, kind of like with Huskar, I don't think this is very good because now you're choosing where before you could get both. And even though it's a little bit better than it was, it doesn't apply to buildings, which is huge because Liquid Fire was so good applied to buildings. It was like such a big part of the hero with like helping you push, especially with all the glyphs we have now. You just applied Liquid Fire to the building and it like didn't even clear through the creep wave with the glyph, and that was huge. But now with that not being something that exists, it's just not nearly as good. So I think overall it's kind of a nerf for the hero. Then we have Juggernaut, which is really interesting. This hero just gets more damage if people are facing him, and it always happens in an Omni Slash. And then you also get crit damage equal to same stats as Blade Dance, which is your crit. If you choose the facet Blade Storm, which is obviously just straight up more damage, you're doing more damage all around. And then Blade Form, you get stacks, so every 2 seconds up to a max of 10, and then each stack grants agility and move speed, and then stacks are reset upon taking any damage after a 3-second linger. So it's almost like if you're running around in smoke or running around in the jungle and taking no damage because you're not farming creeps, you're like trying to hunt for a kill, and then you just like go in and ult somebody, you just do way more damage. But that's kind of weird because it doesn't really help you other than in that very specific case. Like it's not helping you farm creeps because I'm guessing creep damage counts. Unless creep damage doesn't count, but I feel like it definitely has to. So it's just kind of awkward. Like, why would this matter? I don't really know. Like, why would you pick this over this Blade Fury crit damage, which is going to happen in so many more cases? But overall, I think it just buffs up the hero generally. I mean, there are some small changes to the early game crit chance and the bonus damage by 10, decrease. It's not a huge deal. Overall, I think it just makes the hero a little bit better. But this one's just a little bit awkward, that blade form right there. Then we'll move on to Keeper of the Light. This hero just amps up the max mana of everybody in that 900 AoE around the hero. Kind of boring, but whatever. And then Solar Bind is one of the fastest, and then Recall is the other one. So you basically have to pick one of these 2 abilities that the hero had by default. So this is another one where it's like not super creative, nothing really crazy that changed with the hero. It just you have to pick one of these. People are probably going to pick Solar Bind like every time because it's kind of core to the hero. Recall is one of those where like I think everyone just forgets it's even an ability, so Solar Bind is just going to be the default, I feel like, in almost every case. Then we have Kunkka. This is one that was like previewed before. Tidebringer's now a default passive ability that you can upgrade 5 times or have 5 levels in. Pretty straightforward. They just kind of adjusted things like that. But now you actually get cooldown reduction if you pick this facet every time you hit a hero by 0.8 seconds, which is pretty cool. It just amps up the ability to use this more, even though the cooldown was rescaled up here at the first level. So it is one of those things that, if you do hit a hero level 1 with this Tidebringer, you're not actually going to have it up instantly. But if you hit 2 heroes, it's pretty close. So it's pretty good. But then this Grog Blossom is pretty interesting because X marks the spot, basically gives that Ghost Ship Rum buff for allies in an AoE when this X comes back. So you can actually use this in a support type of way where you just like use it on an ally and then quick X them back instantly, and they get a Ghost Ship buff on them to take less damage. So that's kind of cool. It's also obviously cool if you're using it on an enemy and bringing them back, and then everyone's kind of in that AoE trying to kill them when they're back in the X. So I think it's just overall a decent buff, but that's obviously more of the support version, where High Tide is more of the offensive version. So it kind of makes sense there. And then nothing else super crazy here with these changes. Then Legion basically has a Moment of Courage is just now the passive, which again you can get put more levels into, nothing crazy there. Overwhelming Odds is just amped up to give a damage barrier whenever you cast it based on the damage you deal with the Overwhelming Odds. So kind of interesting there. I don't really see, like, it's just decent, just kind of a buff for it, nothing crazy. But then Spoils of War is pretty interesting because when a duel is won, any unit that damaged the loser during the duel will permanently gain 4/8/12 bonus damage depending on the level, which is kind of insane because you're going all in for the damage, especially with your team. But then obviously if you duel somebody and then you die, that's really not good. So it's like kind of going all in on that, which is pretty cool. I like that idea. I feel like people are going to pick this all the time just because it's more exciting, but it's going to grief things a lot more obviously as well. And then with that, Ag Scepter no longer provides dual damage reduction for like allies and stuff, but it just gives you like Ags, which is pretty cool. I mean, I always hated that, it like, because people would buy it and then you'd have a Skywrath on your team and it's like, dude, this is such a great combo, why'd you buy this item? But now you don't have to worry about that anymore. Then Leshrac kind of just nerfed overall in general, because this hero was good. Like everything is pretty much a nerf here, except obviously then they just changed some things with the innate ability. Now you have an increase spell effect by 0.5 for each point of intelligence, the area, kind of like the AoE, which is really good, obviously, for his ultimate. So you're just going to be getting a lot of intelligence on this hero, so now your spells just have a bigger AoE, which is really good. I think that's a cool buff. But then with the two facets, you basically have one where Diabolic Edict is just kind of the same as it was, pretty much, I would say. You just have 40 explosions that apply over 10 seconds. The difference is Leshrac's attacks now restore mana, which is pretty cool. I think this is kind of the default one people are going to pick. I mean, not that he really attacks very much, but having an attack speed item then on the hero makes it like decent. Like that's actually something you can use now. And then the one over here just like does a lot more damage. Like Diabolic Edict just does a ton of damage really quickly, but it doesn't affect buildings. I think affecting buildings is just one of these things that is really good on the hero. Like it just makes the hero have that ability to push, take the mid tower, all that kind of stuff. I don't know that this is going to be picked that much. I think the biggest thing we'll have to see is it doesn't do insane damage really quickly on like one or two heroes. That might amp it up. It might heal you by a ton. That could be why people would pick it if they already have a ton of push already. So it is just kind of dependent on that. But overall, the hero's kind of nerfed other than those changes. Then Lich is a very interesting one. Another kind of interesting passive here where Lich's max mana regen is always 0. But when creeps or heroes die around him, then he gains mana. So it's kind of interesting because you're going to be laning and you want to be near the creeps so you can get more mana back. It's an interesting concept. We'll see how that works out. And then the facets basically are Chain Frost, being able to bounce and then like hover around a target and then bounce to them again, so that like even if you're casting it on one guy, you don't really have to worry about that because it's not just going to delete the Chain Frost after one bounce. Like it's not completely useless if you're just like solo picking off some hero. And then the other option is just like if you are casting Chain Frost on heroes and creeps and stuff, it's giving you more bounces when it's hitting those creeps and killing them. So it's not just like wasting all those Chain Frosts on those creeps. And then also Frost Shield is amped up because if creeps are killed or heroes are killed, that Frost Shield lasts longer. So I think it really just depends on the situation. Frostbound is just kind of like makes it so Chain Frost is not as like the low level of how bad it is not like it's not that bad. But then if you're using the abilities correctly, I think Growing Cold is just overall better. Then we have Lifestealer being changed. Feast is now innate ability, and you get a bunch of levels into it, which is interesting because now you also have Lifestealer getting permanent 2 max health per unit killed. So obviously this hero plays as a carry, and if you're just focusing a ton on getting CS, which this hero doesn't have any crazy like cleave or anything like that, but usually buy some kind of farming item, that's pretty cool. I mean, it's only 2 health, not a lot, but that is still significant. It could end up being pretty significant, especially because the other one is Unfettered, which replaces Rage, which is like a core to the hero with this weird ability that just gives you more magic resistance and attack speed, but like, and you get a strong dispel and you can cast it when you're stunned or disabled, but like, I don't know, that just doesn't sound good when Rage is just so core to the hero. So I feel like people are just going to pick the max health every single time. Now Open Wounds is now a basic ability, which is kind of interesting. It's not a shard ability. And they changed it a little bit around. Like, it doesn't spread the stuff. It doesn't give bonus damage, all that kind of stuff. And then Ghoul Frenzy also doesn't slow anymore. And now Infest is upgraded by Agnum's Shard. And the explosion applies 50% duration open wounds to all damaged enemies. So that's kind of interesting. The Shard has changed a little bit there. I don't really know. I mean, this hero was really good recently. This kind of changes the hero in some ways. But now you have this open wounds ability, but you don't slow people. So it's just like, I'm not really sure where this puts this hero, especially with these numbers changes. It's just hard to say, but getting to max health, hey, that's not bad. Unfettered, I think, is bad. So yeah, we'll just have to see what happens with that. Then Lina, I don't really know why they did this to this hero. They made Fiery Soul just like a normal ability, or a passive ability, basically an innate ability that you can level up. And then they just gave 2 facets that did stuff that this hero already did. So basically Laguna Blade supercharges Lina and gives her stacks. So you can see here it no longer does that by default, which it did before. And then Slow Burn just makes you do more damage with your spells over time, but the actual damage is only 60% initially, which is just like bad. I mean, yes, this did apply damage over time by default, and now it no longer does, so it kind of already did that. I mean, maybe this is amping up your damage a little bit more, but it just feels awkward. Like, this hero was not that good, I feel like, and now they just kind of took 2 things it already did and then made you have to choose them, so that just feels weird. Then Lion, this is like a weird passive. I think this is just like a phone it in kind of one where he gains 20% debuff duration and 20% spell amp for 90 seconds after respawning. This is just like, this hero is just picked by like a million people in Herald. They just like feed off cooldown, so they're just being more effective after they're feeding, I guess. That's just really what it is. But then you have to pick for Mana Drain to do damage equal to the mana stolen, which is kind of something that already happened. That's why they're taking it away. And then Finger of Death has Fist of Death, where now you become, after casting Finger of Death, you become like a melee hero and you like punch people and you get stacks, and I don't know, that's super awkward. I feel like no one's gonna pick that. Like, maybe this is for carry or like mid lion, not carry lion, but like mid lion. It's a thing. I don't know. That's just really awkward and weird. But let's just move on. I just don't know that that's gonna be picked or really relevant. Then Lone Druid, the Spirit Bear is now his like passive. He just always gets it, and then he can choose to like have a link that's better with the Spirit Bear, where you kind of trade the lifesteal back and forth, which is pretty good, and then the shared armor as well, which is pretty good. So that can be like a amp up to the hero, because the armor and the heal are just, I think. The one thing about the hero is it felt like, yeah, you healed a lot yourself from the bear's attacks, but you also wanted to attack because you could do the entangling roots or whatever, or entangling claws with your own hero, especially because you were so tanky, but you weren't healing the bear. But now that you can just go in with both things and you can heal the bear too when you're doing attack damage, I think that's pretty cool. And then this other one, Spirit Bear's attacks heal Lone Druid, but not the other way around. And then transforms the Spirit Bear, so it just like amps up the Spirit Bear even more, where Transform did kind of the old thing here. So I don't know, this is kind of awkward though, because Transform is so good on yourself. I just feel like it just feels a little bit awkward that they made you choose this, because I feel like you're just going to choose this one every time, the Bear with Me, not the Unbearable. But I don't know, I guess it depends on the game. And also if you're getting Ags, I guess this is one's just better for late game with Ags. Then we have Luna. Now Luna has 20% bonus cast range at night. Now the Shard is kind of as a thing you have to pick with a facet a little bit here, and it just makes Glaives overall is a little bit worse. And then Lucent Beam, you get attack damage for every Lucent Beam that hits, and that includes 50% of the Lucent Beams that hit during Eclipse. So it's kind of which one do you want to pick. And obviously you can get this Moonglaves thing early, so that actually helps farming a little bit, even though the bounces are decreased from 6 to 5 at max level, that kind of stuff. But having it innately is interesting there. And you still get the Shard that like helps it, it kind of amps it up, but it's just not as good innately as it was. Then Lycan's kind of a weird one, because you get like 2% extra damage to neutral creeps per hero level. Interesting, so you can just farm faster. And then Shapeshift, the movement and critical strike bonus are now applied to all units under your control, so you're just kind of becoming even more of that zoo hero. And then it also extends your Shapeshift by 5 seconds when you kill units, so that's kind of interesting too. I think if you like could farm super fast, maybe you just have like infinite Shapeshift on. It's kind of interesting. But the Spirit Wolves one is the crazy one, because now your these summon wolves are replaced with spirit wolves. They are invulnerable, they uncontrollable, and they can't attack. They just kind of hover around you and they just like amp up your hero. So I guess it's basically like, hey, do we want to do a zoo hero, or do we want to do like, it's just all about Lycan, all about amping up your ultimate and running in and just hitting people? That's kind of cool. I actually like that, because now this could be like a single target attacking hero. It's like more of like a carry like it used to be, not necessarily a zoo hero every time. So I actually kind of like that aspect to the hero. And then they changed some stuff here too. And next we have Magnus. I have to go quicker, I think, with some of these because we're only halfway done. I don't know how long this video is currently going to be, so I'll probably try to go a little bit quicker here. That always happens. You know, the beginning ones you spend more time on, the next ones you just go quicker. But anyway, with Magnus, his passive is that he suffers less from forced movement by enemy abilities. Just kind of weird. I mean, whatever. Like, that's not really super relevant other than Bat Rider or things like that. But then the cool thing is that Skewer now deals bonus damage when pushing enemies through trees and cliffs if you pick this run through, which is pretty cool. I mean, they kind of adjusted some of his other like basic ability stuff if you don't pick this to like reflect this to make it not like broken. But that's kind of cool. Like if you're skewing people back in through the base over cliffs and stuff, you're just doing more damage to them, which is pretty cool. And then the reverse polarity is like it pushes enemies in a 600 AoE around Magnus away from him to a maximum distance of 700, stunning and damaging them. Instead of like pulling them in, it pushes them away. I don't really know why you would want to do that, though. That's the problem. Is like, how is this good? So just pick Skewer, I guess, every time? I don't know. Maybe I'm just missing something and I don't understand what the benefit of that is, but it seems like there is no benefit. And then we go to Marcy. So Marcy is kind of weird. Permanently increases the level of all allied couriers by 3, meaning you start with flying couriers. I mean, I guess whatever. That's Marcy's ability. I mean, I guess she is like a courier in the show and stuff like that, kind of. But whatever. It's kind of weird. And then Sidekick, you kind of just get the Sidekick ability, or you can get this Bodyguard ability, which is like a Mars ability, I guess. They just kind of have like a weird default thing if they didn't make another image for it. And this one I feel like is a little bit more like offensive in nature if you're playing like a carry version or something, because you get that lifesteal, you get more attack damage, which is pretty cool, but then you can also activate it and like attack an allied target. Like the allied is sort of protected, kind of like that axe or that Mars ability. Then Marcy also attacks the enemy if they're within an attack range of 125, and also grants the ally also gets armor. So basically, like if you click this on an ally that is getting gone on, then you're going to like help them out, make them tankier, and then also do more damage to the enemy if you're like right next to them. So it can be kind of a cool counter initiation thing, I think. Not really sure, because this does like more, like 30% of her base damage, 20% lifesteal. So yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of weird because I don't know how, it just depends on the circumstance, situations. When would you just pick Sidekick versus Bodyguard? I'm not 100% sure. I guess I'll have to see it in action and just really look at the numbers. But I mean, Bodyguard almost just feels like better in most cases, honestly. Then we have Mars. This is pretty cool. I like these changes. Mars and his allied heroes within 200 radius gain increased health regen when they're outnumbered by the enemy. That's kind of interesting. Obviously, it's like playing into that Sparta thing and the 300 and all that kind of stuff, which is kind of like a cool thematic thing. I'm not really sure how good that is, though, because if it's like 3 on 2 or whatever, 3 on 4, you're probably going to lose half the time anyway. But the cool thing is now, his facets are pretty interesting as well. If a hero dies within Arena of Blood, he basically just gets a huge buff. He gets more health, mana, and attack damage for 15 seconds. That's awesome. Really good for the hero, because like a lot of times people are dying in Arena of Blood. Like you're going to use it to stun a guy and probably burst him down. That's almost happening every single time. But then the other thing, if you feel like that's not as good, like you're not focusing on yourself doing damage and being tanky, you just kind of want to get your spell off, whether you're playing support or just in general, that's how you feel like the game is going to go, then you can just get this Bloodsport one where it just amps up his arena like by a ton, because now enemy vision is obscured. So arena walls make it so that enemies can't see the inside of it, and then people inside, I think, can't see outside. They don't have shared vision anymore, which is kind of insane to think about. I think this just straight up makes this hero insane right now, because vision is so important in Dota. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that just seems crazy. Then Medusa, really not too much changed here with the Mana Shield. Like, that was something she already really had. It was one of those heroes like Alchemist that already had one of these passives. And then Mystic Snake, this one just makes Mystic Snake better for her overall because she just gets more damage based on the mana restored. So you can kind of just like take this one if you want by default, just makes the hero a little bit better. But then you can also take Mana Pact, which just kind of, if you feel like it's a game where you're just super tanky, unkillable, there's no like diffusal buyer, there's no anti-mage, you can just pick this because it drains your mana, but it gives you essentially attack speed, just makes you do more damage. That's really all it is. It's like for a short duration, you're draining your mana, but you're doing way more damage. And if it's a really good game for that, you can pick that. Now that's kind of risky though, because this Mystic Snake one is just better by default, especially in most games, I feel like. So it's kind of one of those risk reward type of choices that you have. Then Meepo's kind of a weird one. This one is where you get additional choice when activating neutral item tokens, and then which is just like kind of whatever. And then this Meepo one, just like the default Meepo thing, but then this pack rat, you actually get to use the neutral item slot, and you can put another item in there, which is kind of interesting. I don't know how like good that is, but it seems pretty good because this hero really likes stat items, and you can just like max out the stat items. So I think that makes the hero better. Just an interesting idea overall. They're just kind of like, let's throw whatever into the game. You can use the neutral item slot for a real item, whatever. Then Mirana, nothing crazy with this hero. The passive, just Lotuses are better, whatever, not a huge deal, not super exciting. And then Moonlight Shadow just is what it is. It's kind of the same thing as it always was, but then you could replace it with this Solar Flare ability, which is way more offensive in nature. You just get more attack speed and damage and all this kind of stuff over time with daytime and all that kind of stuff. So just really all focused on that, where Moonlight Shadow, obviously we know what that does. Makes you invis, it's all about ganking, it's all about surviving and things like that. So it just depends which one you want to use. And it's not all about yourself either, because it says Mirana's allied heroes also receive this buff, but bonuses are decreased by 50%. So it's not just about you, it's also about just like more offensive in nature. Maybe you just feel like the invis is not that good for that game, so Solar Flare can be really good. Then we have Monkey King, another one where he already kind of had this other ability, so he just has Mischief. It's the same thing. And then Wukong's Faithful, basically when you cast Wukong's command, usually when you jump out, everything just like disappears. But now you kind of have 3 seconds to go back into it, and the monkeys will stay there. So that's kind of interesting. You can pick that now. And then also, if you don't want to pick that, if you feel like that's not really that good, because I don't know how relevant that is and how many situations, you can just have Tree Dance have no cooldown if you're at max health, which is kind of weird because like if you are jungling, you might not be max health all the time. So, but if you are like, scouting, trying to fight, you're smoked, whatever, this is really good for that. Then we have Morphling, kind of an awkward one. Morphling receives 50% of attribute gain bonuses every half level instead of full, but then also increases all attributes bonus gained for skill points in the talent tree from 2 to 4. So like, I don't really know how, what the math adds up. I'm not going to do that here. It's just kind of like an awkward, weird one. But it is what it is. I don't know if it's a buff, nerf, if it ends up being equal what it is, but it doesn't sound that relevant, that big of a deal. And then you could just get, normal adaptive strike and normal primary attribute being agility, or you could do this like weird support, off lane, like stunner kind of thing, where your primary attribute is strength, and then it just kind of like makes your cooldowns better, I guess. But that just feels awkward and not great. I mean, yes, you can like morph into enemies that have good spells, and that could be like the spell casting version. But unless they do something else, I don't think that's really going to be relevant. Then we have Muerta. The cool thing about Muerta here is that now she can attack when ethereal herself, or attack anybody that's ethereal basically at all times. It's like an innate aspect to the hero, which is kind of cool. Now, the Dance of the Dead, if an enemy dies, a hero dies in the calling, then it's like expanded, it lasts longer, that kind of stuff. I don't really feel like that's that good, because like how often is that really happening? I mean, I guess you cast this usually when you gank people and kill people, but like, I don't know, you kind of place it where someone is. If you kill them, like most of the other enemies are like running away from it. So does it really matter that you have this? And this other one is going to be better because this Ofrenda, Muerta places a sacred altar at the targeted location. When respawning, Muerta will spawn at that location and destroy it, putting the ability on cooldown. This is really cool, really interesting, and really good, I think. I mean, you don't have to use it if you don't want to. You only one exists at a time, and you can destroy it if you want. So it's not like you're like going to grief yourself. I just think that's really good in certain situations. Like you could just spawn there. That is kind of crazy. Honestly, that's huge because, when you respawn after death or whatever, it's like you don't really want to TP out because then you can't TP other places and help for a while. Like if you put this down, whether it's in lane or anywhere else for split pushing or farming in the jungle, you can just like put it anywhere. Any global ability like this is pretty crazy. Then, changes here, but not super big. Then we have Naga Siren. Gets evasion for each Naga Siren within 900 radius. Then we have Naga Siren. Basically, you get evasion for having all of your illusions around you, which is pretty interesting. And then Riptide is just like the normal ability that you can choose, or you can choose for Deluge, which is more of like an active ability where you decrease their status resistance, but you also do damage. So it's kind of like, do you want this passive ability that just does what it normally does, or do you want to like choose to use this thing and then also decrease status resistance? That's kind of the main thing with the hero. Not super interesting or unique, not crazy, just pretty straightforward. Then Nature's Prophet, pretty interesting because the passive you get 6% bonus damage at max level for each tree within 300 distance, and you also get more for each Nature's Call treant, which is kind of crazy. This is just like amping up this hero's right-click damage as like a right-click hero, which is pretty cool because I feel like this hero is just better as, a core. I just like it better as a core. This whole like Nature's Prophet 4 running around and using Sprout on people is super annoying, but they still kind of have that because now Sprout can heal allied units and it can heal buildings, which is kind of crazy. That's actually really good. It's one of the only heroes now, Nature's Prophet and Treant, can heal buildings. It's like very rare that actually happens in Dota. And then also, along those lines, this no longer damages over time, it just does immediate damage, which is pretty interesting. And then teleportation also doesn't give you damage or armor stacks, it just gives you a damage barrier, which is interesting because obviously all of those things kind of change the way the heroes play, but also you get all that damage now just passively being around trees, so that's why they kind of took that out a little bit too. Then the other thing that's really weird is this Ironwood tree treant, where you can get this like beefy tree when you use Nature's Call. I don't really know that that's going to be good. Like, I just don't think that's that good. I don't know. Maybe I'd have to see it because obviously there were those big beefy trees that you used in the past, a year ago or whatever. Maybe it was with the shard. I honestly forget how you got them, but yeah, you had them and they were really annoying, but I don't know how good these really are. I'd almost rather just go for the right-click damage version, and then you can heal yourself, you can heal people, you can heal buildings, all that kind of stuff. Then Necro, you just get the heal from Heartstopper Aura just innately, and now this no longer does that, which is just kind of like makes this ability boring and dumb and stupid, and why do we even have it? But I mean, it is what it is. I feel like they should just replace this ability with something else. Then you can also get more AoE, kind of like the Leshrac. If you pick this Profane Potency, you get that with the stacks, and then of the Sadist, which is pretty cool. And then you can also just get more movement speed based on the movement speed you're taking away or slowing people with Ghost Shroud. I don't really know how relevant or good that is. I think maybe this might be better because the AoEs increase. Like when you kill people, when you kill creeps, you just get more AoE for your abilities, but I don't know, it's hard to really say. Then Night Stalker, pretty interesting. I think they just like typed this out weird because the passive is up here where you get health regen increased by 40 at night, but during day it's decreased by 40 or 20%, which is kind of interesting. I don't know how good that's going to be overall. I mean, it's just health regen. It's kind of like whatever, but 40% is significant. And then this is another like vision thing, which is kind of a theme of this patch as well, where when you void enemies, they no longer share vision with their teammates, and then deals 50 damage per second when affected enemies cannot be seen by their allies. That's pretty crazy. I like this vision stuff, kind of we're playing with that, not something we've really seen before. Then the other thing is we can actually switch the day-night cycle on this hero, so you can actually lane for the first 5 minutes at night if you feel like it's going to be a bad lane. Now the thing is, once you get past that 5 minutes, now there are like nighttime duration increased by 15 seconds and daytime duration decrease, so it's not exactly 5 minutes, but still, then you kind of are saying, okay, well, I'm just going to be passive from 5 to 10 minutes and then be active from 10 to 15. That just kind of switches up how the hero is played a little bit. Then the other thing is the Ag Scepter is removed, and now it kind of becomes one of those toggleable abilities where it drains mana, and you can just have this silence on you or on the enemy for a long time, which is, I think, really, really good. That's really, really powerful. Now, obviously, you have to have a lot of mana to sustain that, but if this is the way the hero needs to be built, then you can build the mana items probably to allow you to do that. Then Nyx Assassin's pretty cool because you actually are just like a walking ward for invisibility, or for invisible units. So you can just see invisible units in a 400 radius, basically. I think you don't have full vision. You have that kind of like half vision thing, like when Spectral Dagger is on the enemy invis hero, it's kind of like you can see the outline or whatever. And then mana burn, you can kind of get that just innately with your abilities as well, which is something the hero kind of already had at various times. With he had a mana burn ability, and then it was on Vendetta. Now it's just kind of a thing you can get with the Facet, or you can get the Scuttle, which gives you unobstructed pathing and max move speed for the first 10 seconds of Vendetta. I think that can be good. Don't get me wrong, that is good, but it's the first 10 seconds. I'd almost rather have the mana burn, to be honest, but it just depends on kind of the situation, I think. But just picking it outright, it's like, when am I, how do we really know? I'd rather have this mana burn thing that's going to be useful every time I cast an ability. And next is Ogre, which is a funny one. Like, this is just kind of ridiculous. I already had this Dumb Luck passive, and then you can get the multicast thing, which just each point of strength increases your chance to multicast, which is kind of cool. But then you can also get this learning curve one where Ogre starts the game with 0 ability points, but gains 3 ability points at level 2, and then regular ability points for the remainder of the game. Level requirement for all abilities and talents is decreased by 1, so that's kind of cool, I guess. But like, the level 1 just having 0, I don't know, that's literally just a meme. Like 100%, that's just a meme. That's not good. I don't know why you would pick that. Then Omni Knight basically has this degen aura, which is just something that is now passive for him. When enemies are around him, he just slows them, and then you can kind of go all in for like the offensive nature, where the more they're around you and slowed, the more damage you do to them, which is pretty cool. Or you can go for the healing version, where like the more damage you deal, the more you're healed, for like the tanky version. That's kind of the main thing that happens with this hero. Then Oracle is the passive, is basically announcing where the power runes will spawn, which is kind of crazy because this is a big part of mid. So if you just have an Oracle on your team, that mid player is just, they know where it's going to be, and so they can just obviously prepare for that, which is really interesting. There's really not been anything like that in the game before. And then it's pretty straightforward. You can either go for the spell amp or the heal amp. Just really, that's Oracle for you. Then OD, nerfed a little bit here and there, but then now gets 2 extra mana per point of intelligence, which was not something that happened before. And then you can get this Obsidian Decimator, which gives you max mana it increases your max mana by 4% for 7 seconds every time Essence Flux restores mana. So this is really good for like in the middle of a team fight. If you're just clicking, and you're right clicking a bunch, your mana is getting pumped up because Essence Flux is obviously activating a bunch when you're using your Arcane Orb. And then, later on in the fight, after a few seconds that you're just like hitting people a bunch, you can use your ultimate, just going to blow people up because you have so much more max mana. So that's honestly really what this is about. It's just the main thing. You don't have to think about it. You just do more damage. And then this other one that you can pick is good for this like mana allergy debuff, which just heals you. So it's like more for tankiness, which I don't really know. I mean, you just want to do insane damage on the hero, but obviously being tanky is good. It's just a little bit awkward. I don't really know that this is something, I don't know. It's really hard to say which one's better, because obviously we just want to do more damage, but this obviously is something that's hard to really measure, because like, how much are people really casting spells? It's healing you. It's weird. Is it good in lane? All that kind of stuff. So that's kind of one of the biggest things. Now, I will say, actually briefly mentioned on this hero, Ag's Shard now allows Astral Imprisonment to deal damage in an AoE, which is good for farming and good in general. That was something that happened, I think, by default with the hero before and allowed him to farm. Now, you do have to wait till 15 minutes, so it's a little bit weird because of that, but I think overall that's kind of an interesting change to the hero. Then next we have Pangolier, which has a passive that feels really strong, or seems to be really strong. Within 1,200 units, anyone that attacks Pangolier, they have their chance to proc random on-attack effects reduced by 40%. So anything like Basher or Maelstrom or anything like that, I mean, that's just really good. Just kind of like nullifying those items for the most part just seems kind of insane. That seems like really overpowered. This hero is already such a good hero for so long. And then Shield Crash, you can do like a double jump. You can either pick that, or you can just pick like a better Rolling Thunder. I think it just depends which, like, I don't know how much that better Rolling Thunder is going to be with the improved turn rate and the duration, all that kind of stuff. But the duration actually decreased from 10 to 8 seconds. So I don't know. That's kind of weird. I feel like that one's just kind of weird, where you can just pick the double jump. I mean, it is what it is, and it gives you, a barrier and all that kind of stuff. But then overall, Pangolier has been nerfed because this hero is just so strong. So they just kind of nerfed the hero overall, I believe. Lucky Shot was increased a little bit, and there were some things that they changed here as well, but I think overall it was nerfed. Then we go to Phantom Assassin. Now the passive is evasion that you just get innately with level up. So Blur no longer gives evasion, it no longer makes you invisible, no longer allows you to attack without dispelling Blur. It's just kind of like weird. This ability just seems pointless now, especially if you're not picking this veiled one, which now it allows Blur to no longer dispel on attack, and you basically don't have to use mana. So like while Blur is active, all mana costs are reduced. After Blur is dispelled, all abilities and items have no mana cost for 5 seconds. That's pretty cool. But like if you're not picking this one, it just feels like, what does this ability even do really? It just feels like garbage. And then you can actually pick the other one, which makes coup de grace, makes the crit better, but you actually have to use it, or it like activates after a certain amount of attacks. So every 6th attack, which is more reliable, but I think that overall it's like kind of worse, I think, because I mean 6 attacks is a decent amount. I mean, it's so you know you're at least going to get some crits, but you can't like double crit or just like blow people up in 2 seconds. But I mean 550% is pretty insane at max level. 450 to 550, that is kind of insane. So I don't know, we will see if people just decide like, oh, this is just broken right now. I mean, things are going to be broken in this patch. We'll see if this is one of those things. I could see 550% being insane if you can just like time it on the 6th attack and it lasts for 10 seconds. You know, that's kind of a lot. That's kind of crazy. So we'll see if that's broken or not. Then PL, pretty straightforward. Phantom Rush is now like an innate ability that you can level up. And then you can also have Doppelganger spawn additional illusions if you're missing health. So it's just like makes it even harder to find the hero. Or you can kind of turn the hero into like not a very micro-intensive hero by picking Divergence, because this makes your Juxtapose, which is your ultimate, make uncontrollable illusions. I believe that's just kind of like the default then, rather than controllable ones, and they just kind of do the thing for you. So it just makes this hero easier to play, I feel like that's kind of what it's going to do. We'll see if that's good. I don't really know. I mean, it just makes it more accessible for sure. Whether it's good or not, it's hard to say. Then Phoenix is kind of a weird one. You get a stackable mischance with all of your abilities, basically. So that's definitely good, obviously, for the hero, because you're losing a lot of health when you use your abilities, and now it's like harder to fight against you. And then obviously if you have those abilities cast on people and they're trying to fight and kill your egg, it's just harder for them to do that. And then you can pick to either burn all enemies in 450 radius around yourself, dealing 6% of your missing health per second in damage, which is kind of crazy because, like I said, you're using all of your health, but then you can just like have this radiance running around. So that just helps you like farm more, harass more, do all that kind of stuff. Very interesting. Or you can pick Sunray to just like be better. That's kind of what it is. Does more damage, heal, all that kind of stuff. That's pretty straightforward. Then Primal Beast. Very interesting. This hero is doing 40% bonus damage to buildings. Kind of like Tiny in a way. So because it's so big, they just kind of like, hey, this hero should be like Tiny too. So you're going to do more bonus damage to buildings. Then we have Romp and Stomp, which just like makes your trample better, increases your movement speed for yourself and your allies. Or you can just have Roar or Uproar. When you activate it, each stack provides 10% AoE bonus. I mean, that's pretty good too. Relatively boring. I think honestly the cool part is that 40% bonus damage. We'll see if that's relevant, because you don't really pick or buy attack speed on this hero, but now that you do that much bonus damage to buildings, I mean, that could definitely be a build. Puck has been pretty good recently, so I think overall they're kind of nerfing the hero a little bit, but in general they are giving you max health and max mana restore 2% every time you disjoint attack projectiles, or if you disjoint a spell, it's 3 times as much. So this happens a good bit in lane and a good bit in game in general, so it's pretty good for the hero just overall. It's like helping you sustain and in general overall survive more, be even more annoying. Then Waning Rift, you can either push people back or kind of draw people in if you pick that facet, depending on which one, if you have it right clicked or not, if you want to do that. And then Illusory Orb, you can actually curve it, so that we see a lot of this happening now with like curved spells. So I don't know how good that is. Seems like it can be pretty good. I just think if you have to curve it like before you cast it with the vector targeting, I don't know that that's good. But if you can definitely curve it like in midair, that's obviously really good. Kind of like Primal Beast's charge, actually. So that's Pudge. or that's Puck, this is Pudge. Pudge now gets like passive with gaining strength. That's just kind of what he had before, and now he has it in general. They kind of changed the passive ability to meat shield, but now it's not really a passive. It's just like the active and does the damage block and stuff. So it's not really that much different. And then you can choose for Dismember when targeting heroes. Dismember increases Pudge's strength while he's doing that for 12 seconds, which is pretty interesting. And then Meat Hook, you can actually like do more damage when you're dragging the hero back, but it does the initial damage at 50%. So I'm guessing this is more damage overall. It's just like the further away you're hooking people, the more damage you're doing. I would just have to see the numbers to see like how good that is overall. Then we have Pugna. I like these changes with Pugna. It's pretty cool because you can now use any spells and items when you're channeling except other channeling things. So now you can just like use your ultimate and use all your other abilities and stuff. And then you can also restore health and mana based on Nether Ward, or you can just get spell amp when towers are destroyed. So you are a pushing kind of hero. So if you're playing this hero as a core and you're destroying a bunch of towers, you get that spell amp every time one dies, which is pretty cool for snowballing. I like that because I kind of like this hero better when it's like a mid, not as much a support. The support version of this hero is just healing people and being annoying. I just don't love that version. And next we have Queen of Pain, which has like a permanent blade mail on in a 1200 range. Whenever she takes damage, she returns 10% of that damage, which is kind of interesting. But then the weird stuff is the facets. So Succubus, you just get lifesteal, which is fine. You're probably going to pick this every single time because the other one is Masochist, where you get spell amplification by 15%, which is pretty cool. But then you get 22% of spell damage dealt to heroes is inflicted upon Queen of Pain. So you're basically just like taking damage for no reason. I mean, obviously you're increasing the damage you're dealing out, and if you go a really tanky build, this can be good, but it's like, that is kind of weird. It's extremely negative. Of all the negative ones, this probably is the most negative, which just feels like, why would you not just get the spell lifesteal and just be tanky, and then also get even tankier, and you're also like doing return damage too. So just kind of weird. I like the idea, but just feels like it's too negative. Then Razor, just getting more movement speed. It's kind of a thing that the hero's been had for a long time. Now Storm Surge has no movement speed, which is kind of weird because this ability just doesn't really do anything. I guess it shocks people, I guess, but like whatever. And so you can then make Storm Surge even better when you have Eye of the Storm running. So that's good. Or you can just get 1% spell amp for every 20 points of attack damage when you're static linking. So I'm not really sure which one is better. It probably just depends on the game. People are gonna have to play it and see. I'm just not sure. They both kind of sound pretty boring either way. Then Ricky just gets that backstab that he's always had. It's just kind of something classic on the hero, so they're putting that as his innate ability. And then he gets bonus experience for kills and bonus experience for assists based on his level of backstab, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, I just don't really. No, that one seems like another one that's kind of just like, we're phoning it in. But I mean, this is something where it allows the hero to like, accelerate with killing heroes, because it is kind of like a snowball hero where you're fighting a lot and you're not really farming creeps. So I mean, I get that in some ways, but that just kind of allows that. But then Tricks of the Trade, agility bonus is multiplied by 3 against non-hero units. This is kind of allowing you to farm more. So I guess you're saying, do I want to farm more, or do I want to farm? Like, do I want to farm creeps more, or do I want to farm heroes more? It's kind of like, I guess, what you're choosing between these two. That's really, I think, what it is based on there. Also, you used to get bonus XP and kills on assists, and now you don't for Cloak and Dagger anymore, by the way. And then with Rubik's actually a lot more boring than I thought he would be. Basically, Spell Amp, the passive is Spell Amp also increases Rubik's base attack damage, but like, whatever. Magic resistance is increased too, which is fine. And then you can get decreased mana cost of stolen spells, which is really good, I think. And then this other one just gives a little bit awkward. Like, every time Rubik casts a spell, he gains 25 AoE spell radius amp for 20 seconds. This can be good, I guess, but this whole like spell radius amplification, like increasing your AoE, it really is situational and depends. I feel like it would just be better to have less mana cost. I mean, I don't really play Rubik all that much, so I don't know how important mana is on the hero, but I feel like it must be pretty important because you kind of are spamming spells with the hero. And now we're on to the S heroes, so we're getting closer to the end here. Once we're done with the S heroes, we're in the home stretch. So let's just start with Sand King. Caustic Finale is now a passive ability. It just happens automatically. Not too crazy, nothing really to talk about there. And then Sandstorm, now you can choose to either have it make you invisible, or you can choose for it to follow along with you, where before it did both. But now when it follows you, it's actually way faster. So it's not like super creepy crawly like it was before, where it just felt like it was kind of pointless. Now it's going 70% of your current movement speed. So, you know, if you're at the one end and you're walking through it, like it goes pretty fast. And the invisibility was one of the biggest things, especially with the dust change recently over the past year or so, that just made this hero so bad, it felt like. So the fact that you don't have to have that anymore is pretty cool. And you get this other ability now called Stinger, which is kind of just like an AoE damage ability that just gives him something extra. So you have your stun, you have your Sandstorm, you have this other ability, and your right clicks have this passive. So I think that just amps up what the hero can do in general, and it's pretty cool. It's one of those heroes that I feel like everyone kind of wants to see it back in the meta and played more, because it's been gone for so long. Then Shadow Demon, nothing too crazy here. You get stacking debuff that amps damage by 2% per stack with attacking, but it's not something you really do all that often. But I mean, it can be relevant. I don't think it's enough to make this hero a core, but still, just an added thing. And then Disseminate, pretty straightforward. This is kind of what the ability used to do, sort of. Just when you apply to an enemy, lose 15% of their current health, but then they get it after it's over, or you can apply it to your ally and they get 15% instead. Or what you can do is this Shadow Servant facet basically makes it so if an enemy hero dies within a certain range, or you kill them, it spawns an illusion, which can be pretty cool. I mean, because this hero is all about kind of single targeting down a hero, kind of placing a bunch of debuffs on them, killing them, and so it's going to happen a lot. And you have a pretty strong illusion that pops out. So also, you can have multiple illusions, obviously, if you are spawning illusions with your other ability as well. So, yeah, I think this one's decent. I don't know. Disseminate, this one just feels weird. I mean, I guess it could be pretty good, but I like the Shadow Servant thing. I don't know how good it is, but it sounds pretty cool. Then Shadow Fiend, Necromastery now is like an innate thing that you just get automatically. And then Lasting Presence is something where you just get... if any hero is killed nearby, Presence of the Dark Lord reduces armor by 2 for 60 seconds, which that's kind of... I don't know how really good that is. It seems kind of weird. I almost rather get this Shadow Raise thing, where consecutive hits apply the movement speed slow and attack speed slow, which... both of these things kind of already happened, and they just kind of put them in here. I mean, I guess they did give this guy a new spell, Feast of Souls, where you can basically consume souls and get more attack speed. So that does make him better, because he wasn't really very good. So it's weird that they're taking something that Shadow Raise already had, and that Presence of the Dark Lord already had, and then putting it that you have to choose one of them. But I guess this new ability kind of makes up for that, because attack speed's pretty good on the hero, and you're going to have souls a lot. So I guess you're consuming those. But the weird thing is you also consume souls with the shard, so it's just a little bit interesting. But now upgraded with Agnum Shard, reduces cooldown by 2 seconds per enemy. Okay, so yeah, that's right. The shard was changed a little bit there, so that's different, I guess. So now you're consuming stuff with this instead. So, but it's always weird to consume those when it's giving you a lot of damage, but you're just trading damage for attack speed. Then Shadow Shaman, this is pretty cool. Basically, if you take lethal damage where you're going to die, you become a chicken, you have 1 HP, and then you run with more movement speed, and you are strong dispelled. So like any of those damage over time things that are on you are gone. You can just like run away, which is kind of crazy. You also have a small 0.75 seconds of invulnerability, so that's kind of like crazy. I don't know, it's a pretty cool. Now you don't have it all the time, there's a 90-second cooldown, but that's kind of crazy. Then you can also now cast Hex on allies to make a bunch of different chickens. So like to save them, you just like you turn them into a chicken and you spawn a bunch of chickens, and they have to kind of guess which one is correct, sort of like it's like a mini save for an ally, like the Juxtapose, or the Phantom Lancer ability, whatever. Maybe it's Juxtapose, I forget. Whatever it is. The one where he goes in like invis, disappears, and then has a million different guys around. You have to pick which one, or like 3 or 4 or whatever. You have to pick which one's real. It's kind of like that, but with chickens, and you can use it on an ally. Or you can just make massive Serpent Ward. You can just make 10 massive Serpent Wards combined into one giant one that does 10x the damage, but has 7.5x the HP. I don't know. I mean, I think the save is just going to be better overall. This just sounds kind of like weird, but it is what it is. Then Silencer is kind of one of the biggest changes in this patch, I think. They just gave him the innate steal that he always had. And then it's pretty cool because he can't be silenced if you pick this, which is really awesome. This global silence is more of like the support thing, where it's just like, it silences them, and then if they dispel it, it silences them again. So that's kind of cool, but it's more of just the passive support one, where this not being silenced is really more offensive in nature, obviously. And then they kind of reworked all of his abilities, where Last Word is now a passive, where enemies within a certain range of silencer are now slowed, and they take damage if they're silenced, or they have the silence debuff. And then these glaives will silence them after 4 attacks, and it does damage like it always did, kind of. And then Arcane Curse is also a little bit different too, where it does damage, in that AoE, and then if the target casts a spell, then they're silenced for 2 seconds. So it's like they just changed a lot of the things that this hero does, and I think hopefully what I would like to see is that this hero becomes more of like an offensive mid-style hero, because it just felt super awkward when you pick this hero as a support and then you just like press R and that's all you do. And it really should be designed to be more offensive, like a mid hero. Then we have Skywrath Mage just getting Spell Lifesteal, and then you kind of have these 2 ways of just amping up Shield of the Scion, which is like a different ability, and then Staff of the Scion. But basically, whenever you use your abilities and hit them, you either get each stack protects 10 magical damage, Skywrath Mage's level, based on his level. Each stack has its own duration, making this barrier. Or whenever Skywrath Mage damages an enemy hero with one of his abilities, each instance of magical damage reduces all of his cooldowns. So basically you get like tankier, or you have decreased cooldowns, which is pretty good. I mean, either one's fine. I think the tanky thing might be all for nothing, because you might be squishy regardless. So the cooldown thing I think is probably better. Then we have Slardar. Basically the passives in water were all moved back to the innate ability, or move to an uninnate ability, and then they're also increased with Ag Scepter, so it's still good to get Ag Scepter. And then you can get this like Leg Day, which is just Guardian Sprint, gives you this burst of speed, which is pretty good, and you can't be slowed during it, and that kind of lingers off. Or you just get amped up armor. You kind of steal armor with Corrosive Haze, which is pretty cool. Then Slark, you just get the bonuses from the alt. Now you still have to level the alt, but you get those bonuses with movement speed and health regen just passively. And you can actually choose now to have the Pounce steal Essence Shift, or make Essence Shift stacks when you pounce on an enemy, or you can use this, get this Barracuda effect, which basically means that these or Barracuda is the innate ability, but the Dark Reef Renegade basically makes Barracuda, those passives, the movement speed and the health regen, not disappear when enemies see you, or and when Slark is not within 1,200 units of any allied hero, actually. So that's pretty good, because if you're revealed by like a ward or something and you're not really close to people, it doesn't really matter that they see you as much, because you're still like getting a lot of health and you're still running away, which is pretty cool, I think. Obviously this Pounce is really offensive in nature with stacking up those essence shifts, so it doesn't feel as great, but this one is to like have to pick that over this thing. It'd be great to just get this thing all together and keep the Pounce that way and have another facet, but it is what it is, because I'm a Slark player. I like Slark, so I kind of wished he had something else, but whatever. Then Snapfire, they're kind of going more towards this right-click version in a way, because now Snapfire's attacks deal 25% more damage, but they also have like a percentage chance to do a glancing shot that deals 50% less damage. Kind of weird. I don't know how the math works out on that. But then you can pick the Facet Ricochet, where if attack that can't miss deals 75% of the damage, will bounce towards enemy heroes. So like if it misses or glances, you'll just do more damage by bouncing it towards other heroes. So that kind of makes up for that weird buckshot like passive. But then you can also do more of a support one, where it shoots Scatter Blast in a more narrow cone, but actually flips the more damage. You actually do more damage when they're further away, which is just more for supports basically. Pretty straightforward. And now Little Shredder also deals 25% of Snapfire's base attack damage, which is pretty good. Kind of just amping up this hero's like right-click ability. And now it's not all about like getting that late game timing, but you can still do that, obviously. Then Sniper, kind of an interesting one. You just get that attack range. It's pretty obvious. Take Aim. Sniper isn't revealed in Fog of War when attacking enemies. That's kind of crazy to pick that, because obviously we're getting a lot of these weird vision things in this patch, which is pretty cool. I like that idea. Now, who knows how broken and strong these kinds of things will be. This hero's already pretty strong. That can be very, very annoying if you don't know where he's coming from, where he's hitting you, and he's just hitting you from fog, which is kind of crazy. Or you can do Scatter Shot, which shrapnel lasts 1 second, but it does 4 times the damage and movement slow times 2. So that's really weird because it's almost like a burst thing that happens. Like you could just clear through waves or stacks or whatever, or hit heroes really, really quickly. I feel like that's one of those things you have to see actually happen in person to judge how good it is. Then Spectre, basically he's permanently phased movement speed, pretty good. And then the Reality Rift, casting Spectral Dagger, something he used to have, but now you have to pick it. Or you can have Desolate deal 40% of damage if the target has only non-hero allies within range. An ability's damage is applied to Spectral Dagger. So like this can be pretty good too. It's just kind of, I don't really like how they're taking some things that the hero has innately and then just like making you choose between two. I mean, I guess that's fine because you could just have what the hero used to have and that's great, but it'd be cool if they just had that because they're buffing so many other heroes in other ways that it'd be cool if you had 2 new things, but whatever, it is what it is. Then Spirit Breaker, interesting passive here. Provides hero in your team with the least experience points with a buff that increases their experience gain by 50%. This is kind of interesting because it's just going to increase the experience in your team total overall, just like not exponentially, but you know what I mean? Like you're just going to get more experience than the other team, just downright period overall with this hero, which is kind of weird. Like I don't really know that I like that overall. Then we have Bull Rush, Charge of Darkness, makes charge bonus speed fade out over a short duration after the charge ends, so you can kind of lingers, which is interesting. And then Nether Strike, enemy receives a debuff that increases the distance of the force movement applied to them by Spirit Breaker and his allies, which I don't actually know if this is that good, because I mean, you're like hitting them and they're like moving further away. I don't really know if that's good because you want to keep hitting them and bashing them, but if you're bashing them, they're like flying away from you. That's not that great. And then Bull Rush is kind of underwhelming too. And the biggest thing is this Greater Bash no longer deals bonus damage to creeps. That's kind of crazy because that's like a huge deal for this hero farming. So this is like big nerfs for the hero, honestly, I feel like. Then Storm Spirit, this is really cool because I used to love playing Storm, not as much anymore, but this is now giving the old Bloodstone to the hero just innately. Basically, you just like get up these stacks if you kill people, and that just gives you insane mana regen, which is awesome. And so now and then in the past, when you would die, you would lose those charges. So you're basically just getting Bloodstone for free, which is great. I love that change on this hero. It's probably one of my favorite changes so far in this patch, because I always wanted that like old Bloodstone to come back, especially for Storm. And then also you can choose to have Electric Vortex kind of put a debuff on a hero, and then if they attack you after this for like 6 seconds, they will get an Overload Explosion on them, which just gives amped up damage and they can't really fight back. Or you can actually use Static Remnant to be like a targetable ability that you can like throw out, not really where your hero is, but almost like an Ember Spirit, like a Remnant, which is pretty cool that you can like choose to do that. That kind of changes the dynamic of the hero, I think, a little bit. Obviously, you're not going to be teleporting to that, but it is very interesting that you can do that now, especially for like the laning stage and stuff too. And then we have Sven. This is pretty straightforward. He just does 15% more damage to stunned enemies. You can either get a damage barrier or just straight up do more damage with Wrath of God. Like your base damage is increased and you just do more God Strength damage. Just really that simple. Sven, straightforward, easy, do damage. So now we're moving on to Techies, and he just has the Minefield sign, pretty straightforward. He also gets 1 attack range for each point of attack speed because they decreased his attack range. That's kind of a weird one. And then the other really weird one is that he can use items in his backpack as if they're real items in his inventory, which is like crazy. Why are we giving that to Techies? I don't know. Or he can just get this like blast off one, which does more damage, I guess. I mean, whatever. It's like so weird. But it's based off max health, I guess, which is pretty cool. But this is just like such a weird configuration of things to give this hero. I don't really know. Then TA Psi Blades are now like an innate part of the hero. You can slow movement speed if you want with them, or you can have Refraction grant damage instances every time a shield instance is consumed, which is interesting because they no longer grant damage block instances. It's just kind of like a weird change to the hero overall. I don't really know how much better or worse it is. It's hard to say. I'm not really a huge TA player. Then Terrorblade has kind of a change to the illusions. Illusions outside the range receive a certain range, receive a penalty, and illusions in the range receive a bonus damage thing. So it's like less good for farming, waves and pushing waves and stuff like that. But then Sunder, you can remove the minimum health threshold, which is pretty good because then if you have like 0 health and you Sunder somebody, they basically are just dead. Or Conjure Image, illusions can always spawn with full health, but the ability also costs 20% of the current health, which is, I don't know. That's just really awkward too. I think this whole thing is a little bit awkward because now we can't really farm waves. This Sunder thing is fine, but the Conjure Image thing, that doesn't seem good at all. I don't know. Maybe I'm just wrong about that, but just it seems very, very weird. Then Tidehunter gets that kind of innate passive that he had from Kraken Shell, where he just is able to like shrug off and dispel stuff. And now Kraken Shell is kind of a weird one because here you can get this damage block that permanently increases, which I feel like I would pick like every single time. I don't know why I would pick anything other than that, because this Krill Eater, it just decreases Anchor Smash's range. And yes, you can increase the range with the hero level and stuff, and the strength, starting strength and strength gain is a little bit different. I think at the end, this is also a little bit better with the strength, but still, it's just very awkward. I think Kraken Shell is just going to be better overall. Then Timbersaw, we're just giving this hero more ways to get mana and do damage. So if he destroys trees, he gets mana, that's his passive, and then he can choose to either have a Timber Chain that like explodes trees and does damage in a random direction, or you can get like a different kind of new chakram that just like is an infinity sign it's kind of uncontrollable, but you can just do more damage by like sending that out too. So this hero just gets more mana, more damage, which is pretty interesting. I don't know like how good that actually is. This hero's been good for a long time, it feels like. Then Tinker is changed. So they gave Tinker 1% item cooldown reduction per 4 intelligence. I don't really know why that matters because this hero refreshes. So that's just really awkward. Maybe it's good for like BKB, I guess, whatever. The biggest thing is that they got rid of Heat-Seeking Missile as an ability, and they gave him back March of the Machines, which I don't love that. I'd rather them just get rid of Defense Matrix altogether and just bring back the hero as it was, but at least March of the Machines is back, so it's kind of like it used to be in some ways. It's just this Defense Matrix ability I hate, but now you can have March of the Machines heal you when they pass through allied heroes as well. There's healing, which is pretty cool defensive thing for like defending. Or you can have Defense Matrix blink you in a direction when it's fully absorbed to kind of get you out of sticky situations even more. But then they also changed the laser to not have an AoE effect. There's just weird changes here. I don't really know how this affects the hero, because like now the main damage you're doing is with laser and March of the Machines. It's just a little bit awkward. Like you're going to farm quicker, but you just have the laser for doing damage, maybe your Shivas that you're going to buy. I'm just not sure how this is really going to affect the hero. I do like the March of the Machines coming back, though, because that's kind of, I really liked playing the hero back when it had that originally. Then Craggy Exterior is back for Tiny. That was kind of a thing that it had before, and now you're just like decreasing everybody's attack damage when they're attacking you. This hero's already tanky, hard to kill, and now it's even worse for enemies. So that's pretty good. Tiny's always been like a good hero recently, so this makes him even better, I think. Then you can upgrade or make Toss better overall, just like doing more damage and slowing people's attack speed and stuff when they land, all that kind of stuff. Or you can just say, I'm getting 25% of my strength as slow resistance and 10% of my strength as status resistance. This is just kind of like a passive thing. I don't know, maybe if you're just doing like core Tiny, you pick this one, but I mean, even the core Tiny with the Toss seems pretty good, but this is obviously a more support Tiny over here with the upgraded Toss. And then Treant gets Nature's Guides, pretty straightforward. Treant gains 5 attack speed per hero level, or I mean 5 attack damage per hero level. I mean, I guess whatever, who cares? And then you can also just put a tree on the ground with Leech Seed to like do the Leech Seed in an AoE. Very boring, very, very boring. Then Troll gets Berserker's Rage as a passive, so you don't have to like choose to get this or another thing level 1, which is kind of cool. And then the Fervor, you can get 1 armor per stack, or you can give the 30% of the attack speed bonus to all allies globally when you use Battle Trance, which is something that kind of it used to be. Battle Trance was like a global attack speed ability. Then we have Tusk. Basically, Tusk's kind of AoE chill effect where it reduced attack speed is now his passive, which was kind of something that was along with Tag Team. And then you can choose to have Tag Team, or you can choose to have Drinking Buddies, which is basically something where you just like choose a hero on your team, you kind of pull them closer to you, and then you guys have movement speed, a bonus attack damage for 5 seconds. So it's kind of like, just you can gang up on people and just kill them, or it could be a little bit of a save thing too. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. So with Underlord, basically Atrophy Aura is now a passive, and then you can also have Atrophy Aura make you a cleave hero so you can farm. This is pretty cool with this hero. Maybe this hero can actually be viable now because you can farm super quickly. Maybe it can even be like a carry, Or, I guess not and, you could make this hero like a push hero, because now Fiend's Gate can make uncontrollable warriors and archers to fight for you when you go through them, which is kind of insane. You could just like teleport to the enemy towers and just like kill them in 2 seconds. That's pretty cool. So you can kind of go with this like carry cleaving farming facet, or you can go for this other ability that is basically allowing you to push super fast. I think that's really cool. I really like that. Probably one of my favorite changes right now for some of these heroes. It really just amps up and changes the dynamic of the hero overall. Then Undying, this is probably one of my least favorite. I think a lot of people are going to hate this because his passive is basically that, yeah, it's on cooldown for 480 seconds to start the game, but you basically automatically respawn in the fountain when you die. That's just, I mean, yes, his name is Undying, but like, come on, guys, nobody wants to see this. And then for the facets, you can choose Flesh Golem to spawn zombies when you hit people, or you can Soul Rip allies and they gain 10% of your strength for 10 seconds. That's kind of cool. Both of these are boring compared to respawning instantly, though. And then Ursa, you get 1.5% of your current health as damage, which is pretty cool. Then you can build like straight up health on this hero just to get even tankier, and then you do more damage. And then Enrage is kind of like an absorbing damage thing that you can then give back to people with this buff that for 5 seconds after Enrage expires, which is pretty cool. Or you can just get this passive where your just debuffs apply for 20% longer. I mean, that's kind of just like a throw in the towel, or just like, you know, they didn't really try very hard with that one, but that one's pretty good if you don't think this is that good. And then we have Venge, who has Retribution as a passive. So whenever an enemy hero kills Venge, they get a debuff until their next death, so she can just do more damage to them. And then you can choose either one of these, which is kind of like support or core, which the support one is base attack time is lower, but damage is increased for magic missile by 0.75 for every last hit or deny the enemy target has, or the target enemy has, which can be obviously really good when you're a support and you're using this against enemy cores, which is kind of crazy. That's kind of a unique thing. I like that. I like these like unique ideas they're introducing here. Or you can have base attack time being better, and then Vengeful Spirit's attacks fire traces of her soul that punch the enemy on contact, making her attacks have melee behavior. So basically she becomes a melee hero, which is really interesting and cool. I don't really know how this is going to affect, like you can buy Basher and stuff, I guess, whatever. Very interesting. Then Veno, they removed Latent Toxicity, Poison Nova. They made Poison Sting an innate passive ability. And then they also have Noxious Plague, which can spread twice. And it's just reduced damage after the second time. Or Plague Wards can be cast on allies, attaching the ward to them, which is kind of really interesting. And the wards become untargetable and die one at a time whenever the unit they're attached to receives a certain amount of damage, and the wards attack the target. So that's kind of interesting that you can do that. And then they kind of changed up some of these spells. I don't know, the Noxious Plague just like amps up the damage, but this Plague Ward on allies is kind of interesting. I just wonder how good that will be. Then Viper Corrosive Skin is just like this passive now. That is innate. Poison attack, I think we maybe already mentioned it at the very, very beginning, but you can just like put it on people and they explode, or it explodes and does 100% of magic damage dealt in that AoE, in that target, in around 300 radius. Or you can just go for the tanky version with like amping up corrosive skin and the magic resistance increase and stuff like that. So that's kind of the main things for the hero. Also, Nosedive no longer disarms, but I mean, whatever, not a huge deal. These things are bigger. Then Visage. So Visage, just that Gravekeeper's cloak is just a passive now, basically. And then you can also go for this just amping up of the Grave Chill, or you can go for Faithful Followers, which makes your summoning familiars just kind of be these things that follow you around. So familiars always follow Visage and cannot receive direct attack or movement commands. Kind of the rest of it is not as big of a deal. Like, it does make things a little bit better, but you can see this, that they're doing this with Visage. They're doing it with PL with Phantom Lancer, and I think maybe a couple other heroes, or maybe one other hero. They're kind of making this micro not as important. Oh yeah, with Lycan too, I think you can pick the one that makes him just like be a right clicker. They're kind of making it so that these heroes that nobody picks because they're very micro intensive, you can pick them now and just kind of pick this facet that makes it not really a micro hero, which is kind of an interesting concept. Because like, I mean, at this point, nobody really plays these heroes unless they're like specialists. So might as well make it more accessible. And if it can be one of those things like in Street Fighter, where if you're not actually pressing, like in Street Fighter, if you do the combos in like a shortcut thing, they have like shortcut ways to do the combos, you do less damage. So if you actually know how to play it correctly, you do more damage. So they can do a kind of thing with that here too, where it's like you can play the micro hero, but there's things that are not as good about it. If like it's easier to play, but then it's better to play the full micro version. Like the hero is better actually. So I think I like that kind of idea, that concept. Then Void Spirit, pretty straightforward. You get 33% more secondary bonuses from primary attributes, which is here is universal. Then you can have Resonant Pulse make a barrier that absorbs all damage types, or you can basically make a magic damage or a damage shield equal to the magic damage dealt 40% of the magic damage dealt to enemy heroes. So it's kind of like very similar sorts of things, but it's just this one is more about the damage you're dealing, making the barrier, and then this is just that the barrier absorbs all damage types. Then Warlock, spawning those little imps that run and explode at people, that's just his passive now, and then Chaotic Offering is just amped up, or you get this weird like item that you can use. It's like a neutral or regular item slot, and you can be kind of put it in your backpack. You can't put it in your backpack or drop it. You can put it in either one of those slots, and you can consume it at a random time in the game, and basically it just gives you experience. But that experience is based on like hero kills and assists that you get. So like if you wait longer, you get more experience, but if you need experience now to hit a level, so it's like kind of one of these weird things. It's a very unique thing. I don't know if I love that idea, but it is kind of an interesting thing. Then they have a bunch of changes here, but they're nothing like too crazy. Then Weaver, Geminated Attack is just one of those passives now that you get a bunch of skill points in. Then Shikuchi, you can make it so the movement speed that you have is increased and also slows the enemy when you hit them, or you can have the Swarm actually giving you more experience when it attacks enemies. That's just another really weird thing. These like weird giving more experience things, or these like, oh, I can sell items for more money now. All that kind of stuff is just like weird stuff that I feel like may not stay in the game for a long term, but I like them trying to experiment with that kind of stuff. Then Wind Ranger just basically can't be slowed past 240 movement speed, which is kind of interesting. So I guess if you're like hexed, you still move pretty quickly. I don't really know what the hex movement speed is, but yeah, just like kind of slow resistance is innate to the hero. Then you can have Wind Run, bonus movement speed for yourself and allies, or you can just have Focus Fire doing like the normal thing, or you can have Focus Fire doing like Whirlwind or whatever, which like attacks a bunch of people in this AoE. So like if you don't want to just be a single target focused hero, you can actually change that about the hero, which is interesting. Then Winter Wyvern, another really weird one, kind of like the Oracle, like predicting where the rune is. This one is like if you pick up the Wisdom rune, everybody else on the team gets 20% of the experience that they wouldn't get if you didn't have Winter Wyvern on the team. Kind of weird in that way. And then whenever Winter Wyvern restores health or heals an ally, 15% of all healing is for mana, which is interesting. I mean, that's just an extra way to give people more of what they need. Everyone wants health and mana, so that's good. To choose just like as a passive thing, it just makes that healing better. And then Winter Wyvern gains bonus damage and attack range. Basically, this is the offensive version. So this is like the defensive version. This is the offensive version. It's pretty straightforward. It's really not more complicated than that. Then Witch Doctor is another one. It gets one of these weird items. Basically, you get this item, and when you die, you like lose gold and stuff. That usually just happens. And then at any point in the game, you can consume the item to get all of that gold back, which is just really weird. So it's kind of one of these things that doesn't like punish you as much for feeding. And then the facets are just, you can amp up your cask damage if you just want to do that. You can have Death Ward attack 2 people, but it does less damage, so that's kind of like risky to go for that. And then Voodoo Restoration just doesn't heal, but does more damage, which is kind of weird. It's more of like an offensive core like Witch Doctor, so I think most people are just going to get the Paralyzing Cask one, because these other ones just have too much downside. I don't really love that for what it is right now. Then Wraith King, kind of big changes here. Vampiric Spirit is now a passive, so it kind of takes 2 of his abilities, kind of mashes them into one, makes him have lifesteal against creeps and stuff, and then also makes him able to get those. Oh yeah, that's right. Wraith King is transformed into untargetable Wraith when he dies, and then like it's kind of what the old like Ags or whatever did, but now Ags still kind of makes that happen to your allies. But it's basically just like the passive lifesteal is what he gets. And then the skeletons actually are a choice now, because you can make the skeletons with this Bone Guard ability basically, and that can spawn the skeletons in a similar way that it did before. And then Reincarnation also can spawn skeletons. I think it kind of did that before as well. And then you can also choose, instead of that, you can choose this Spectral Blade ability, which is just kind of like more straight offense, not pushing, no skeletons, no farming for that. You're placing a curse on people. It deals pure damage and physical damage equal to some 70% of the cursing attack, that kind of stuff. So it just amps up this guy's damage. So if you want to be all about like Mortal Strike and doing damage to people, you can pick this one. If you're all about farming, you can pick this one, or like pushing, that kind of thing. It's just interesting because this is the way the hero farms, but if you pick this other one, then maybe you're just going to go for more of like a Maelstrom or Radiance or something like that. So it's just interesting to see what this makes the hero do. If maybe this is like more off-lane build, this is carry build or whatever. And then finally we have Zeus, where the static field, that's just kind of like what this hero's been doing for a while, where he just does percentage of your health as damage. But then you can choose to make that be based on distance, so the closer you are, the better actually. Or you can just make Thunder God's Wrath do damage kind of in weird intervals between the strikes, kind of starting with the lowest HP hero and then amping up Thunder God's Wrath when you kill heroes. So I think for the most part, people probably are going to pick this one, the Divine Rampage for Thunder God's Wrath, just because that there's really no downside to it, where the static field just, there can be downside, and if you're up in people's faces with Zeus, it just might not be as good. So that's kind of why I think people are going to pick this. But otherwise, kind of they nerfed this hero a decent bit just because it was so good recently. And that is the patch. That is the summary of the patch. I don't know how long this video was. I mean, I'm exhausted now. I can barely talk. It's late. I stayed up way too late. Now I got to edit this and upload it in 2 seconds. We'll see. I don't even know. This is going to be, I'm going to get no sleep tonight. But anyway, I do actually enjoy this patch so far. I like the changes. They're all pretty interesting and pretty cool. Nothing like absolutely ridiculous, insane, crazy, but all the heroes are fresh and new, it feels, which is kind of ridiculous. There's a lot to learn here, but it is really exciting. I'm excited to jump in there and learn all these new things. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. If you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.